Wednesday morning, February 5th, 2020 session of the Portland City Council. Okay. Good morning, Carla. Please call the roll.
Good morning. Fritz?
Here.
Hardesty?
Here.
Udaly?
Here.
Wheeler?
Here. We usually read a script allowing Commissioner Fritz to speak. Does anybody have any objections to Commissioner Fritz participating by phone? No objections. Good. We'll now hear from legal counsel on the rules of order and decorum.
Good morning.
Morning.
Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during City Council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. If it does not, you may be ruled out of order. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, a yellow light goes on. When your time is done, a red light goes on. If you are in the audience and would like to show your support for something that is said, please feel free to do a thumbs up. If you want to express that you do not support something, please feel free to do a thumbs down. Please remain seated in council chambers unless entering or exiting. If you are filming the proceedings, please do not use bright lights or disrupt the meeting. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting or interrupting testimony or council deliberations, will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being ejected for the remainder of the meeting. After being ejected, a person who fails to leave the meeting is subject to arrest for trespass. Thank you for helping your fellow Portlanders feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Thank you very much, Carla. First up is communications. I understand the first individual may not be here, but we should read it anyway.
Yes, sorry about that. Item 84, request of Jeff Knapp to address council regarding negative impacts of Bull Run water filtration plant on adjacent property owners.
Is Jeff Knapp here?
He said he's not able to make it today.
Okay, very good. Could you please read the next three individuals together, 85, 86, and 87, please?
85, request of Ian Corder to address council regarding negative impacts of Bull Run water filtration plant on adjacent property owners. 86, request of Lauren Corder to address council regarding negative impacts of Bull Run water filtration plant on adjacent property owners. And 87, request of Floyd Jones to address council regarding negative impacts of Bull Run water filtration plant on adjacent property owners.
Good morning. Welcome. Thank
Good
you
morning.
for being
Good
here.
morning.
I'd like to request some additional time via Jeff Knapp.
I'm sorry, we're only able to give 3 minutes per person. I apologize.
Okay,
Thank
no
you.
worries. I have two versions. I'll read the short version. Thank
And
you.
you can also submit one for the record, and we'll make sure, I promise we'll read them. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'll jump right in here. My name is Ian Corder. I'm here to offer testimony in opposition to Portland Water Bureau's proposed water treatment plan in East County. To put it plainly, this is an unnecessary, immensely expensive endeavor that will have grave impacts on water rates for Portland residents and businesses, alter the taste and quality of Portland's water, and ruin the rural community of Pleasant Home. As I digest the available information about why the plant is being built and consider the decision-making process, I find myself bewildered by the lack of accountability for the Water Bureau and imprudent decisions made by this council. Currently, my trust in the city's government is extremely low, and here's why. The primary reason for a treatment plant to be built is to address federal drinking water rules pertaining to cryptosporidium. That is the foundation of this entire project. Although much less expensive options for treating crypto exist, council opted to select filtration because it's expected to provide additional treatment beyond what's required to satisfy the federal rules. In December of 2018, Mike Sturr, with support of his staff, the Water Bureau explained the filtration plant at Carpenter Lane in East County would cost $500 million, which is 2.5 to 5 times the cost of a UV treatment plant up at Headworks. Council sided with Mike Sturr's recommendation, approving the $500 million option over the less expensive alternative. 9 months later, Mr. Sturr returned to council, revealing that an additional $350 million would be needed to install pipes to carry water from the existing conduit. to the new filtration plant at Carpenter Lane. At that time, Mr. Sturt told council that the Bureau forgot the pipes. In hindsight, we know this was dishonest for two reasons. The Bureau's own assessment report, which predated their cost estimate, highlighted the need for pipes at the Carpenter Lane site. And secondly, it's obvious that a water treatment plant won't be functional without a water supply. My contention is that the chief executive of the Water Bureau lied twice to this council. First, when he provided the cost estimate in 2018, and second, when he explained why the pipes had been forgotten. Here's the important part. How did council respond? In short, nothing changed. Mike Sturr, David Peters, they still have their jobs. City Council recently approved a $51 million design contract, despite the Water Bureau's deception and poor rationale for the project. You're moving forward. I've been struggling to understand why City Council would be eager to spend this much money on a project you don't need. It's something the Water Bureau wants, yes, but it's not something the city needs. Recently, I learned about the city's 5% utility fee. Could that be a source of motivation behind this project? Why is this council willing to support this? 5% of $1 billion is $50 million that will go into the city's general fund. Is that influencing this process? I'm suggesting to you and those listening to the testimony that there's something corrupt in this process. What you're doing may not be illegal. But it's no less corrupt for government to use interagency agreements, self-imposed timelines, and complicated policymaking to conceal the true reasons for a massive public expenditure.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Lauren Corder. My testimony today is a continuation of my unfinished statement from last Wednesday regarding the unnecessary proposed billion-dollar water filtration project. The repeated strategic misrepresentations by the Portland Water Bureau and the commissioner in charge are alarming, and this project continues to move forward. City Council, you are failing ratepayers. You should be holding this agency accountable with their frivolous infrastructure projects. The essence of Portland Water Bureau's strategic dishonesty on the filtration project is when Mike Sturr revealed the cost for pipes. Let me remind you of the timeline leading up to this point. In August 2017, City Council approved filtration at the cost of $350 to $500 million. Following a site selection process, the Carpenter Lane site was selected in August 2018. Jacobs Engineering explicitly stated in their report that Carpenter Lane will require additional raw and treated water pipes because the site is about a mile off a conduit. In December 2018, Portland City Council approves $500 million for the project at Carpenter Lane, with no change in cost from the 2017 estimate. 9 months later, in September 2019, Mike Sturr finally discloses that the project budget will need to increase by 70% because he forgot to include the cost of pipes. Mr. Sturr did not forget the pipes. If he read the engineering report in 2018, he knew that pipes would significantly increase the cost of the project. Yet in 2018, he strategically waited for City Council to approve filtration at Carpenter Lane before the big reveal. Intentionally withholding critical information, waiting for City Council approval, and then asking for forgiveness when the truth is finally publicized is not the actions of a prudent agency. Portlanders deserve a council that keeps this agency accountable. Last November, I had a meeting with Commissioner Hardesty just before the $51 million Stantec design contract decision. Commissioner Hardesty voiced her desire for an objective, third-party review of the project and budget by another engineering firm. Unfortunately, this was never pursued. However, this is exactly the type of accountability Portland Water Bureau needs. Portlanders cannot be saddled with a $1 billion project solely based on the recommendation of the benefiting agency. Lastly, I need to point out that our community will fight this project at land use, and we will guarantee that the City of Portland will not meet their 2027 deadline. You will find yourselves in 2027 without compliance to the federal mandate and an ever-ballooning cost to your constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Floyd Jones. I'm with Friends of the Reservoirs, and it was Friends of the Reservoirs back in 2004 that first exposed the Water Bureaus having been involved secretly, along with their cozy consultants, in crafting this regulation. Why is it that not one other utility in the entire United States wrote comments supportive of this regulation that's flawed? flawed from the start. Every other large unfiltered system submitted scientific scathing comments against this regulation. But I've heard the Water Bureau say this multiple times, managers. Designing and building is glamorous, maintenance is boring, and that's behind a whole host of large projects. In 2017, the Water Bureau asked you to throw out $16 million spent on UV radiation, which complies with this regulation. They said filtration solves all problems, right? All the hypothetical, theoretical, manufactured problems. They submitted no evidence to you of any of their hypothetical theoreticals. What's most appreciated always about Bull Run water and our protected watershed is there are minimal chemicals. We don't have to dump in massive amount of chemicals. And up until about 15 years ago, water was affordable for all. And there's no yucky taste that's associated with the polluted water systems that require filtration. He told you there are thousands of filtration plants across the country. Yes, there are. There are thousands of polluted watersheds across the country where you have to put in these chemicals. What else did he tell you? He told you, oh, turbidity is a problem. I have gone to wholesale customer meetings for 17 years, taken time out of my whole life to do all these things. And if you read the reports just from the last, say, 3 or 5 years, they don't tell you turbidity is a problem. It's the opposite. The opposite. We hear this repeated in news articles all the time. They tell you, oh, population is climbing. Yes, it has for the last 2 decades. And what's happened to water demand? Through their own charts. They don't even produce them anymore because they don't show what they want you to show, that water demand has gone down. They'll talk about catastrophic fire. Well, shouldn't you be able to look across the country and find scenarios like that? Well, you can. You can look at Denver, and what does it do to a filtration plant? It shuts it down. Mike Sturr has never paid a Portland water bill. He doesn't have an appreciation for the lack of chemicals, for the lack of yucky taste. But those of us who are born here, who live here, who appreciate all the work that our forefathers put into protecting this watershed, don't want high water bills. We don't want chemicals in our water. You can turn this around. That's up to you, whether you turn this around or you take us down this path, but it's really a horrible legacy. I mean, so far we've already spent $500 million, not counting on the treatment side of this, but on the reservoirs, and we didn't get much for that. I could go through a long, long list. I could spend an hour talking to you about the flaws. You need to turn this around.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And I believe we have one more individual, Carla.
Yes, number 88, request of Portland Youth Climate Council to address council regarding the climate crisis.
Good morning. Welcome.
Hi, my name's Simon Skates. I've been here before. You probably recognize me. I'm part of the Portland Youth Climate Council.
Good to see you.
You too.
Move the mic a little closer.
A little closer? All right. Is that good?
Yeah, that's
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm here to talk to you today about our ongoing concerns about the Zenith Oil facility, concerns that we know you share. The expansion of oil production, its storage, and combustion is dangerous and destructive, going against everything science is telling us to be able to continue living on our planet. We understand that blocking Zenith's expansion, or better yet, shutting their operation down entirely, has proven difficult. Yet Zenith is a huge threat to our future, and we need you to continue this fight. In fact, Zenith Energy and previously ARC Logistics have operated their facility on a Title V air quality permit that expired in 2012. 8 years on an expired permit. This is unacceptable. However, there is a way the city can take a significant stand. The DEQ needs to take action on this permit, and luckily, the city has a great deal of potential power in this process. In Oregon, cities get to make a land use determination in conjunction with this type of permit. Zenith has to request a land use compatibility statement from the city of Portland. And that is where the city has the power and the opportunity to halt this project's expansion and shut it down. The city must ask the DEQ not issue a permit until the city can review the consistency of the permit with the local land use compatibility. The last time the city of Portland issued a land use compatibility statement for the address at which Zenith operates was in 1995. A lot has changed since then. And there are many ways that Zenith's operation is not consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. The environmental destruction and degradation from oil extraction and combustion, the heightened risks and dangers of tar sands oil trains and tar sands facilities, as well as the liquefaction risks, all pose threats which are greatly endangering to our communities. Not to mention the expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure, and on top of that, Zenith is operating with an expired permit. If you can't drive around your car with expired tags, why can a tar sand oil facility operate with expired permits? In order to protect everything we love and care about, the Portland Youth Climate Council asks the city to use its power to undertake a complete land use review and determine that Zenith Energy is not compatible with the 2035 comprehensive plan, current code, and binding city policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And could I get a copy of your testimony?
Yeah, definitely. I can give you mine.
If I could grab that, if you could just leave it with Carla?
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you. Good testimony.
Yeah, thank you.
Greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. Carla, have any items been pulled off of the consent agenda?
We've had no requests.
Please call the roll.
Fritz,
I am super excited to vote for the consent agenda today because the first item is to create 2 new represented classifications of 311 customer service representatives. I'm really, really happy to see that Mayor Wheeler is the mayor who's finally getting 311 done, and I'm very happy to vote aye.
Hardesty. Aye. Udaly.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The consent agenda is adopted. First time certain item, please, item number 89.
Extend contract with Calais America, Inc. for multi-space parking pay stations through April 23, 2025 for continued operations, additional door upgrades, system expansion, and provide for area permit program online permits for $16,164,000 for a 10-year total not to exceed $31,039,000.
Thank you. Commissioner Udaly.
Thank you, Mayor. Council originally executed a contract with Calais America in 2016 for parking pay stations that you see throughout the downtown core, central east side, northwest, and other areas of the city. This was a large contract and has a provision to extend for a period of an additional 5 years until 2025. This ordinance before us today is to amend the contract with Calais America to accomplish the following things: maintain the operations of the 2,200 existing pay stations, allow PBOT to purchase additional pay stations if new paid parking districts are developed, provide for online parking permits, and provide customer service through the help desk. I would like to turn it over to the city's Chief Procurement Officer, Lester Spittler, and PBOT's Parking Operations Manager, Chris Arms, to provide you with a background and details of this amendment. Welcome, and please state your names for the record.
Thank you, Commissioner Udaly. City Council, my name is Lester Spittler. I'm the city's Chief Procurement Officer. The legislation before you is an authorizing ordinance to amend the contract to add 5 additional years to the term and add a significant amount of money to the contract. I'm here co-presenting with PBOT to support this amendment. My staff and I have met with PBOT leading up to this event and have worked with them on this solution. We examined all of the options for what would be the best next step to expand the system and leverage the existing taxpayer dollars that have been invested in this contract and the system so far. After discussing options and associated costs, we are in agreement that this is the best option for those reasons. We also believe that the terms and conditions of our contract are more favorable than what we would be able to obtain from a competitive effort on the open market today. And for those reasons, I'm here again to support this effort and answer any procurement or contract-related questions. If not, Chris Arms from PBOT is here to present on the details of the amendment, and she can answer any scope or system-related questions. Chris?
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. We are here today with an ordinance to amend the contract with Calais America. PBOT entered into the existing contract with Calais America in 2016 for a 5-year term. The contract has a provision for an extension of additional 5 years. The original contract included operations of the existing on-street parking pay stations, procurement of up to 1,000 additional machines, customer support, and help desk. There has been 3 amendments to the existing contract. Amendment 1 was for $1.2 million and added a payment gateway service. Changing the gateway service to Calais has saved approximately $600,000 annually. Amendment 2 was for $150,000 for the development of an online digital permit system. And Amendment 3 was for $1.75 million to upgrade existing machines to be ADA compliant and to convert to a pay-by-plate system. With the amendments, and the current contract total is $14.875 million, and the new requested amendment is to extend for 5 years and add $16.1 million. The three pieces to the amendment today. The first piece is continued operations of the pay station and help desk support. The $9.6 million of operating funds includes wireless and payment gateway, management system, and a pay-by-plate and text receipt fees. The second piece is completing the upgrades of the existing machines and the ability to purchase up to 600 meters if needed to expand existing districts or if there is an adoption of a new meter district. The third piece is an online permit system. Currently, the area parking permits issues 30,000 permits annually, and this is a paper system. The new system will be online and eliminate paper applications and permits. For community members who do not have access to a computer, they can call customer support for assistance or come to the customer service center, and staff can issue them a permit. To reiterate, the requested amendment is to extend the 5-year term and add $16.1 million. A request for proposal process will start in 2024 for a new contract to be in place in 2025.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. I noticed on your slide, it said that you would start the outreach in 2025. Was that just misprint?
Yeah, it will start in 2024. I expect it to be a lengthy procurement process, and so it would need to be in place by 2025.
As do I, which is why I was concerned about that particular slide. What's going to be different in the new contract as you go out next time for to look to see what else is out there?
Well, technology is changing very rapidly in this sector, and we anticipate there may be the ability to need less on-street pay stations, and there may be other options for payment. And so we will put an RFP out seeking new solutions for that.
And today we have like different meters depending upon what side of town you're on. If you're over by Multnomah County's office building, the meters, you put in your license plate and they don't let you actually add any dollars to it. And then, then we have the old meters that seem like they've been around forever. Is there gonna be some continuity in the new RFP?
Yes, so, actually, the existing system, we are looking to change out all of the pay stations on street, so they're all the color touchscreens with a pay-by-plate system and not a pay and display, so there is no more paper.
Commissioner Fritz has a question.
Good morning. Would you please tell the folks at home about the modifications that you've required to be ADA compliant and the different languages that are now available, please?
I'm sorry,
Are the enhancements in multiple languages?
Yes, so right now, the new pay-by-plate system and the color touchscreens will be available in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Russian.
And
you've also
ADA.
improved the ADA accessibility, right?
Yes, so the new upgrades with the meters, they meet ADA with the display and then the height from the ground.
Very happy to see those modifications. Thank you so much.
How does this contract evolve as the technology evolves? A lot of us are using the Parking Kitty app, and it's convenient if you happen to have access to a smartphone, and I'm assuming that the penetration is going to continue to expand in the years ahead. Is it fair to assume that eventually we'll just move to an app-based approach? Or do we know?
Well, currently, there's 40% of the transactions are through Parking Kitty, so they're mobile transactions. So the new RFP, as we move forward, will look for different payment options and whether what would be available to people through their mobile device or what would be available on street. And so we'll make sure that we have options for everybody, whether they have a mobile device or not.
And because I'm assuming a large part of the cost here is the infrastructure itself, putting the stations out there. And eventually, my assumption is we'd want to move people to an app-based approach to this and get rid of the infrastructure.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think that's possible, just because not everyone has a phone. People visiting from out of town may not have the app.
Yeah, we anticipate needing to have a payment system for people who do not have a mobile phone or a credit card. And so right now, the on-street kiosks allow people to pay through coin.
All right, well, it sounds like the flexibility is there, and I'll just keep an open mind with regard to what the future holds. But at some point, my guess is maintaining the infrastructure is not going to be cost-effective relative to the proceeds that are coming in from people who still need to use the old school.
Yes, what we anticipate is there may be an opportunity to distribute the machines out over a larger area, and so there would not need to be one on every block face for people to access.
Yeah, good idea.
Or
All right.
maybe we'll just all have chips implanted in us. And I'm kidding, Mayor, I'm sorry.
I do have one more question.
Yeah, please, Commissioner Hardesty.
Does the city of Portland make any revenue from parking meters around town?
Yes, so currently,
Yes.
PBOTS generates about $36 million from on-street parking.
And so that goes into PBOT's budget and used for transportation improvements, I'm assuming, since it's PBOT?
Yeah, so we recover our costs for maintenance and operations of the machines, and then after that, the remaining goes into the GTR fund in PBOT to be used for different projects throughout the Bureau.
And the GTR fund is,
The general transportation revenue, which is,
for our listening audience, thank
Yes.
you.
sorry.
It's one of the few revenue streams with no strings. I mean, a lot of the money that comes in the Bureau is very specifically targeted, so
That makes sense.
it comes in handy.
Wow, that's not a small piece of change. Thank you.
Great. Any further questions? Very good. Is there public testimony on this item?
Yes, we have one person sign up.
Great.
Lightning Super Karma.
Mayor, I have a comment.
Yeah, please, Commissioner Fritz.
I just want to make sure that as we move forward, you must be able to continue to pay with money on the street. That's so difficult for tourists and anybody else if you can't actually pay with money.
Yes, my name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Karma. Again, I'll just be upfront. I'm really tired of these people out of Florida, Clearwater, Florida, to get these type of contracts. I want to see the people from Portland get these contracts. I really don't like to see contracts going to other states. That is my biggest objection to what the city council does. I want the locals to be taken care of. I want the locals to have the jobs. I want the locals to have all the money circulated to all the business owners by these contracts. Instead, the money goes back to Clearwater, Florida, where President Trump and the Mar-a-Lago and all his friends live. So I'm not happy with this. Issue number 2 is I didn't see any comparables to why you think this was a good price on the amendment. I didn't see any other comparables through any data, any other company saying this is really a great deal. How do we vote on something we have no comparables to understand? And of course, this company is going to say, oh, this is the best price you can get. But you brought up some good points, Mayor Wheeler, on app and different other ways of doing this. I'd love to hear from some other companies on that issue, because I think you're right. That is the new direction we're seeing everything going right now. And why they can't do this, or has another company been able to do this, but it appears this company has this locked in pretty good. They were able to extend this 5 years out again, and by the way I read this on this ordinance, it says for a 10-year total. Now, I was told it goes out 5 years, and maybe they'll do an RFP in about 4 years and see where we're at, but by this, I'm reading goes out 10 years. Now, if I'm incorrect on that, that's okay. But if I'm not, this company will stand back and say, no, your ordinance said for 10 years on here, and guess what? We're going to get our 10 years whether you like it or not, and that's normally how it's going to work. So I want to make sure that's very clear. I want to see other bids from other reputable companies that do this. I want to see other new technologies that are brought to the table. Because even by this agreement, they've stated, well, we might put in additional ones, and then we might not. So there's kind of this option of maybe we will, maybe we won't. What direction do we go? Again, it's hard for me to make a decision this big a number without seeing actual data, actual comparables from other legitimate companies that want this contract also. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Fritz had a comment. Commissioner Fritz, did you have a comment?
I'm sorry, that was for the last one. Thank you. No, I don't.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Any further discussion on this particular item?
I'd just like to clarify, we're 5 years in, and we've got 5 years to go with this. I'm also very much a buy local, do business locally person. I do not believe that there is a vendor that could provide this equipment or the services in Portland or even the state of Oregon. We at PBOT care about getting a good deal, and we are extending this contract because it makes the most fiscal sense at this juncture. And in the next few years, we will be looking at all the options moving ahead. Thank you, Mr. Lightning.
Very good. This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Next item, please, is item 90, time certain.
Portland Streetcar Annual Report for 2019.
Missing two characters.
And it's 10:15 time certain, and it's only 10:04.
Oh, you know what? Let's go to some, have a seat. Sorry for the fire drill. No worries.
That almost never happens.
Let's go to, yeah, I know, that's impressive. Let's go to a couple of second readings all the way at the end of the regular agenda. Could you please read item number 106, Carla?
Carla, before you do that, Mayor, there's a script for the electronic communication that you're reading still. I think that should be done in advance of the second readings on these items.
Okay. Pursuant to PCC 3.02.025, Commissioner Fritz is participating by telephone because of?
She can.
Because she can. Without Commissioner Fritz's participation by telephone, there is not a sufficient number of council members present to conduct all the city's business, which is true on emergency items. Does that satisfy your requirements?
It might. Give me 1 second, please.
Okay, that's what my script says.
We already determined there's no objections.
Yeah, we did that earlier.
Yeah.
Say that one more time, please.
I said earlier.
Yeah, so here, I'll read down to the bottom. Do any of the council members who are physically present object to having Commissioner Fritz participate by telephone?
No.
No, I don't hear any objection.
I
Very
do
good.
object to this cut rate sound system, however. We really need to upgrade.
We upgraded it last year.
Oh.
It's just a new one.
Oh, boy. Okay, no objections.
All right, she'll let me know if we're good.
The rules state that the council is to be making a record of the circumstances constituting the emergency, which requires the use of the telephone, and a record of the nature and extent of the attempts made to give the physically absent council member an opportunity to participate.
All right, Commissioner Fritz, help me out here, please.
Folks, it's really hard to hear you today. The microphones are not really playing up. Could you say that louder, please, Mayor?
Commissioner Fritz, can you hear me okay?
It's really hard to hear everybody.
People hate government. Jesus, this is going to take us.
If you could all speak louder, that would be very helpful.
It's the sound.
Commissioner Fritz, can you hear me okay?
Molly, you set my.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. So I'm going to read for you what the rules require for the participation by telephone. The council is to make a record of the circumstances constituting the emergency which requires use of electronic communication and a record of the nature and extent of the attempts made to give yourself, the physically absent council member, an opportunity to participate by telephone. So if you could just give us a little bit more information on why you're not able to participate in person today, that would fulfill that requirement. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I had major surgery 3 weeks ago, and I'm still recovering. I can't get in this early, but I am participating by phone.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I did not feel it was my place to disclose that, so that was my reluctance.
Yeah, that
In
seems
fact,
a little
I believe there are
invasive.
laws against me disclosing that kind of information. But nonetheless, here we go. Second reading, item number 106.
Amend contract with Analytical Services, Inc. for a no-cost extension to provide backup cryptosporidium laboratory testing in support of Portland Water Bureau's bilateral compliance agreement with Oregon Health Authority.
Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, please call the roll, Carla.
Fritz.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the ordinance is adopted. Next item, also a second reading, please, is item number 107. Could you please read that item?
Authorize an intergovernmental agreement with the Board of Governors of the Colorado State University System for laboratory services for cryptosporidium wildlife scat analysis in an amount not to exceed $400,000.
Any further discussion on this? I certainly hope not. Very good. Please call the roll.
Fritz.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Wheeler.
This sounds like it's going to be a scintillating analysis. I'm glad I don't have to do it. I'm happy to have somebody else do it. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. 108, second reading.
Declare surplus real property at 6 Water Bureau locations and request authorization to dispose of these properties.
Any further discussion on item 108? Seeing none, please call the roll, Carla.
Fritz.
Colleagues, I very much appreciate the discussion last week and the conversation that Commissioner Hardesty and I had yesterday. For the past 11 years, I've probably been the most active member of council in looking after people who live outside and trying to find creative solutions for them. I worked for 5 years to move right to Dream 2 from Force and Burnside to their current location, and I've constantly been looking out for how can we be more helpful to people living outside while at the same time we stress the need for permanent affordable housing. These surplus properties mostly are residentially zoned so that they will be available for new homes to be built, and that of course is what we need the most is permanent housing. And so I appreciate the conversation that we did look into all of the options for other uses for these properties, and I believe that this is the right action. Aye.
Hardesty.
I also appreciate the conversation that we had last week and my conversation with Commissioner Fritz yesterday. My concerns still remain that as a city, we own property that we then sell, and then we say that the biggest cost, the biggest barrier to building affordable housing is land. And we sell the land, and then we go out and we buy more expensive land somewhere else. I hope this council at some time comes together and figures out collectively what we do when we declare an emergency, when we have land and we have people who are in desperate need of safe, secure locations to lay their head at night. I will support this because Commissioner Fritz assured me that, again, all these properties, with one exception, are in residential areas, so the hope is that somebody buys it and builds some housing on it. But I think we could do so much better with land that the city owns, especially in an emergency. I vote aye.
Udaley.
Similar sentiments to Commissioner Fritz and Hardesty. I appreciated last week's conversation. We have been kind of combing the city for PBOT properties that could be used for the purposes of alternative shelter sites, and that has been a kind of frustrating, ongoing process of the last 3 years. So I'm happy I finally have a bureau that has some of those extra properties. I understand that the Water Bureau and BES has kind of special constraints on them due to being ratepayer funded, but I'm going to strongly suggest that we, as a body, establish a community benefits policy for the disposition of public land moving forward. I would love to have that conversation and ensure that we are putting every square inch of property we have to its best use for the public benefit. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
And just to put people maybe at ease, at least in the interim, and I support this idea of a more formalized enterprise-wide approach to this. The Housing Bureau does in fact make sure that they cull through all of the dispositions, and if there are properties that are appropriate for their work, then they definitely express an interest. As just sort of a footnote on this particular one, since it's coming through the Water Bureau, those are market rate opportunities because there is the issue relative to holding the ratepayers whole in the case of assets directly related to the Water Bureau. But the larger point is one well taken, Commissioner Udaley and Commissioner Hardesty. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted, and because we have a time
Mayor,
certain...
could I just comment, please?
Yeah, please, Commissioner Fritz.
I just wanted to thank Commissioner Udaley for her comments and also to credit Commissioner Fish, who put in place this process for disposal, particularly of Water Bureau lands, of all of any surplus property. And for the Water Bureau, the money from the sale of these properties goes into the Water Fund, which helps all ratepayers. So there is that community benefit that it's dedicated to efficiencies and economies within the Water Bureau. Thank you.
Thank you. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. We're in recess for 2 minutes. I'll take full use of it. please, particularly the council, she's having a little bit of troubles hearing and understanding what we're saying, so if we could speak a little more into the microphone, it'll help her understand what we're saying. So with that, item 90, please, Carla. Time certain.
Portland Streetcar Annual Report for 2019.
Come on up, welcome, thank you for being here. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Daly.
Thank you,
I
Mayor.
apologize. Got ahead of myself there.
We're here today for the annual report to council from Portland Streetcar, which continues to provide accessible transit to thousands of Portland residents in the central city on emission-free, renewable energy. I'm excited for you to hear about the success of the Grand Avenue Business Access and Transit Lane that was installed this year, or was it last year? I think last year. Yeah. It gives us a great starting point for rolling out the Rose Lane project and providing faster, more reliable transit across the city. Here to present the report and answer any questions you may have is Catherine Levine, who's our PBOT Streetcar Division Manager, Dennis Allen, the Chair of the PSI Volunteer Board of Directors, and Dan Bauer, Executive Director of Portland Streetcar, Inc. Welcome, everyone. Please remember to state your names for the record before you begin.
Good morning, Mayor,
Morning.
Commissioners. I'm Catherine Levine with Portland Transportation, and today is our 6th annual Portland Streetcar Report to Council. As Commissioner Udaly noted, speaking today will be Dan Bauer, Executive Director of Portland Streetcar, Inc., Dennis Allen, Chair of the PSI Board, and guests. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to bring forward an overview of streetcar service in 2019 and acknowledge that there have been challenges. But we've also found solutions to some of those challenges, and I'd like to quickly call out 3 before moving to the formal report. First, in 2019, Streetcar participated in PBOT's pilot Red Lane project. This was important for our system because we have a location on our system on Northeast MLK, just south of the Convention Center, which is a transit-only lane. And we've had a safety issue with cars encroaching into that lane and getting stuck. The Red Lane pilot project used that location, and since the installation of those improvements, we've not had a single incursion into that lane. So from a safety perspective, we consider that very successful. Secondly, as you know, we had last fall a derailment near PSU at 5th and Montgomery. It was actually the second derailment in that location. Since then, we've worked with a signal engineering firm and designed a secondary system, which has been installed. I know we had quite a discussion about shunt last time, but should there ever be a loss of shunt, there is now a mass detector in place that will prevent switch movement, and with that, we hope to avoid any future derailments in that location. Thirdly, I'd like to call out our focus on safety, and more specifically in the past year with our safety officers' guidance, we've really looked at slip, trip, and falls. So I believe one of the handouts you have is a brochure that PSI created for us. Under the current reporting rules to the state and federal agencies, we report on slip, trip, falls that result in medical transport or may have involved the train because of the fact that the train was moving. There actually were 16 of those in the prior year, but they don't tell the whole story. So as part of our safety program, Streetcar has been recording data on every incident, every slip, trip, and fall. So reportables may have been 16, but there were actually 35 slip, trip, and falls. Gathering data, event recorded data, location data, data on the demographics of the folks who are affected, is designed to help us figure out how we can educate our customers, how we can mitigate any factors in the environment, and try to bring that number down. Our goal is to have a safe and comfortable system for everyone to ride, especially on a low-floor transit system. So in the future, you'll be hearing more about the mitigations we take to ensure that, but I just wanted to bring those 3 items to your attention.
Well, and if I could just say, I really appreciate it slips, trips, and falls, because Oregon has a particularly high rate of serious injury and fatality in seniors who fall for a variety of reasons, and it's gotten a lot worse in the last 20 years, so I appreciate the focus on that.
Thank you. With that, I would like to turn to Dan Bauer, who will provide the formal presentation.
Thank you, Catherine. Again, I'm Dan Bauer, Director of Portland Streetcar Inc. We're the private nonprofit with a board of directors that sits between TriMet and the city and is helping advocate for and help manage the streetcar program. This is a fairly quick presentation. It's nice to check in annually on what's happening with streetcar. I think it's important for everybody to take a step back and recognize what's actually working and working very, very well. Commissioner Daly, earlier when we were talking, maybe a month ago, we were talking about how we don't see each other enough, and it's because things are going well. And that's largely due to the fact that Catherine is a fantastic manager of the streetcar system. So thank you.
I mean, I like you, Dan, but I have no complaints about it.
If we see each other, if things are bad, okay, right? But importantly, the city does own and runs a 100% renewable electric transit system. Very important to recognize. It carries 13,000 to 15,000 passengers every day. That's more than any bus line. That's about on par with the Yellow Line Max. We've had 0 fatalities in 19 years of service. More than 50% of all housing built in Portland in the last 20 years is on the streetcar line, and nearly 40% of all subsidized affordable housing is on the streetcar line. This is all part of a plan. This is happening because we put these things in place, we built the transit, we invested in the land use scenarios, and it's beginning to bear fruit.
And
As we've
Dan,
talked about, go ahead.
Can you define on the streetcar line? Is that
Within a quarter mile.
Quarter mile, yeah, that's what I thought. Thanks.
Not unlike, like other transit systems, the people who live along the streetcar line are the one using it. Our census demographics are 1-to-1 in terms of who rides the streetcar and who lives along it. So those investments in affordable housing or just generally jobs or institutions, those are paying dividends in terms of our ridership. 96% of our riders get to the streetcar by walking out their front door and boarding the train. Again, you're building walkable communities, you're building in transit ridership. As you build housing, you build ridership, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Similarly, you're building neighborhoods that people don't have to rely on cars. So 81% of our riders have 1 or fewer cars. I think about 40% have 0 cars. So you're building a central city here where people are able to get about their daily lives and use the streetcar system in tandem with everything else to achieve their daily needs. There's some more demographics we've included in the annual report here, and here's just a few highlights in terms of the number of people who don't have driver's licenses or income levels, and we have demographics stemming from a number of surveys we've done with riders over the years. We talked a little bit about the business access transit lane on Grand Avenue. I think this is the 5th time I've been at this seat talking about this project. It took 4 years to build. It's actually in. This is a relatively simple fix that took us a while to get in place, but what we're seeing is a dramatic reduction in travel times between Stark and Hoyt on Grand Avenue. We basically just allowed cars to turn right and get that freeway traffic in the next lane over, and our travel times, we were taking upwards of 17, 19 minutes to go about 9 blocks. Now we're routinely doing that during PM peak during the scheduled time of about 2.5, 3 minutes. So much easier to build a schedule, easier to maintain staffing, and certainly better for customers who are trying to get about the city. Having a modern streetcar trying to operate on convenience and having that train stuck in traffic is not the reason we would build the system. So we have a number of opportunities on the horizon to be able to speed up the streetcar as well as improve service. Catherine alluded to a few challenges we've had. For quite a while, our base schedule was 14 streetcars. We cut that back to 12 in September of 2018. What year is it now? September of 2018. We reduced our service by 25% on the east side. And what you saw was a almost 1-to-1 reduction in ridership. We have averaged about 1,000 riders per car running on the system for the last 20 years. When we went from 14 cars to 12.
Commissioner Hardesty has a question.
Yep. Good question. Yeah. So I see you own 17 streetcars. The base service uses 14. One of those streetcars is the prototype from Oregon Iron Works. It essentially does not run. So now you have 16 streetcars. Another one was involved in a massive derailment back in May of 2018. That car is scheduled to come back online this summer. So basically you're running a 14-car service with 15 cars, meaning you had no spares. As a result, we were scheduling service but not running it. So rather than promising something we couldn't deliver, we dialed back the schedule to 12 cars. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it takes years to get new train cars,
Yep.
streetcars.
No problem. We did add a 13th car back in service in September of this year, and you can see I've highlighted here where that occurred. Almost immediately, we saw our ridership increase, and it's amazing if you actually run the trains and open the doors, people will get on. You can see our on-time performance here at the bottom. We're averaging about 80% on-time performance. Normal transit is in the 80 to 85%. And we still have a significant number of early arrivals, so if you're talking about whether or not we're on time, we're actually doing quite well there, 85, 90%. Just a little more on safety and security. I want to highlight that about two years ago, we hired a safety officer. He's in the room here, Steve Fisher, if you can wave back there. Okay. And the stats I have here on the top show the dramatic reduction in collisions since we've invested in that position. This is a position that's required by the FTA, but it's been extremely helpful for us in terms of reducing the amount of small collisions that keep our trains from running on a daily basis. And I've listed out here the most common types of collisions. These are not high-speed things, but they are things that happen almost every day, where somebody is turning right from the middle lane or swerving a little bit and just hits the streetcar just enough to keep us from running full service on that day. So Steve's training programs and keeping our operators up to speed on best practices has been a great investment. The other one was last year, we had a significant number of rear-end collisions, and we've had a very, very focused training program on avoiding rear-end collisions from our perspective, trying not to hit other cars. We've seen a great reduction in that year to year. Just last thing on the horizon, we have a lot of things happening in the streetcar world. One of those is a FTA grant that we were awarded for transit-oriented development planning. This is a land use planning grant that's being administered by the Bureau of Planning, PBOT, and Prosper Portland, looking at potential streetcar expansions in Northwest Portland to Montgomery Park, as well as potential routes on the east side to Hollywood. And that work is being managed largely by BPS and PBOT, looking at potential land use changes and the investments in transit and transportation that would have to go along with that, and thinking about what outcomes we can achieve in terms of affordable housing and affordable office as we're building out the city with the streetcar line. So that grant is underway, and there will be things coming forward from that project over the summer. But right now, what we're doing is just engaging in the public outreach component of that. So there's not a lot to share there. We're also doing a lot of...
Commissioner Hardesty has a question.
I was going to let him finish.
I'll be done in just a second, yep. So the other major thing we have going on, it's important for the city to recognize through the I-5 Rose Quarter project. You run a transit system through the Rose Quarter. As we think about the project, thinking about the freeway project, thinking about Lower Albina, we're talking about having a massive disruption to the streetcar service in that area. So I want to just keep it in your minds as we're moving forward through the I-5 Rose Quarter project. How are we going to manage your transit investment in that neighborhood through the construction period? It's an important conversation. A couple things that's on improving the existing service. We are in the process of installing cameras on the streetcars right now. We have the funds to do that and beginning the procurement process. We are continuing a strong partnership with PBOT on the Rose Lane projects. We have several projects in the pipeline that we're looking forward to there. We have rolled out a transit asset management plan and a funding scenario so the city can better understand where it stands in terms of enough investment to keep the streetcar running and keep it reliable for the next 20 years. And then one of the more important things is we're doing a condition assessment on some of your older cars. So you have cars that are upwards of 20 years old. And we need to be able to make a decision soon about whether we want to refurbish those and what that means, or do we want to buy new ones. And then the final piece before I hand it over to Dennis is just I want to acknowledge that we have some guests here from Brookville Equipment Corporation. We are on path to accept 3 new streetcars from them in 2021. So those are the things that are kind of happening to keep things moving on the horizon. But did you have a question real quick?
I do. Thank you. I actually have a couple of questions. So one is about your surveillance, your video surveillance. Talk about that. What is that? What does that look like? How do people know that they're being surveilled? What happens to the data after it's collected? All that good stuff.
Right. So currently, the vehicles actually don't have cameras, and it's been an issue for security reasons, right? The proposal we have is to add cameras to both the exterior and interior of the car, that the data would be collected on a DVR on the car, and it would overwrite in 30 days. So the only time we would download any video would be if there was a collision or a slip, trip, or fall. Working with the task force here at the city, we have made sure that our specifications will include that there will not be facial recognition abilities within the software system selected.
And who will have access to that data?
The data will be owned by the city. The DVRs will be locked, so there'll be a limited number of people at streetcar management staff who can unlock the cabinet and access and download the data. So typically that, I would say we do have cameras at our facility, both inside and outside. And to get to your question about notification, we provided advance written notice to all employees before we added those cameras so that they understood that they were going to be on site, where they were going to be. And then if there's ever a need to use that camera data, it's downloaded, provided to risk management, where both the city attorney and risk management have oversight of the data.
And is there a scenario where law enforcement would have access to that data? And how would that process work?
I believe that law enforcement could request the data. They certainly have in the past. And we will work with the city attorney's office on the policy and practice for how that data is released and under what circumstances.
We have a real interest in making sure that we are protecting people's privacy rights, so look forward to seeing that. My other question really has to do with like the process. We've talked for over a year about the desire of this nonprofit to expand the streetcar. And there's a board for the streetcar, and then there are these other transportation tables. When does the city council, are you going to come to us and say, well, all these other people decided we should expand, and then it impacts our budget? How does that process work?
But let's maybe back up and recognize that the city is the owner of the streetcar system.
I know.
You own the assets. So any decision associated with investment is made by city council. I wouldn't state that it's the board's desire as much as it is in actual plans. The transportation system plan, the Metro's regional transit plan, all have streetcar projects in them. So there's public processes that go into the planning documents. So our role is to try and advance the projects that are involved in planning documents already. Ultimately, what we're looking about here is investments in the streetcar system, which would have to be approved by the city council for sure. Any land use changes would have to go through state approval, city council. So our board doesn't really have any authority in that regard. What we have is recommendations. So we don't, just like any other policy associated with the streetcar, if we wanted to raise the fare, our board has no role in that. We can say we think this is a good idea or a bad idea, but ultimately it's your decision. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
I want to introduce Dennis real quick just to say a little bit more about the board, and then we can go from there.
Thanks, Mayor, Commissioners.
Morning.
Dennis Allen, Chair of the Board of Portland Streetcar, Inc. I'd like to thank you for your partnership. Our structure of a nonprofit, public-private partnership, is really a model, and it's going on almost 20 years now, a model for most streetcar systems around the country and certain other public-private partnerships. It allows the property owners who are helping pay for it, the city, the transit agency, advocacy groups that are important to reliable and safe transportation, key partners in the city like OMSI, PSU, and the Portland Trailblazers, all to be at the table, if you will, to help make decisions, governance, all those things that ultimately, as Dan said, get recommended to you all. So it's a big part of it. We appreciate that, and we're proud that it's been going on almost 20 years now, and this has continued to be a successful, in our eyes, structure. Of course, key to that is providing reliable, safe transportation, and therefore, as you know, 20 years is a long time. We're coming up on the need for new cars to increase this service, and you've been instrumental in helping advance that. And we're hoping to get our car share soon. So to that end, we decided, or we're lucky to have in town, representatives from Brookville, who's the builder of these cars, to talk about their company and also the project that they're building for us. So we'll have them come up now.
Thank you very much.
And this will just be a quick hello. This is Rick Graham, President of Brookville, and Joel McNeil, who's the Vice President of Business Operations. Did I
Great,
make that
thank
up?
you.
Business Development.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, fellow commissioners. We just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to partner with your city, and we look forward to delivering cars to you and having a long relationship as well.
Yeah. So again, good morning and thank you for having us. We've been in business for 100 years, and we manufacture rail equipment, custom built to specific needs. And more specifically for what we're doing for Portland, it's in the streetcar market. We've been doing this for 2 decades. We have over 100 vehicles in operation across the U.S. But for us, it's very well known that Portland is the model city for streetcars. I mean, we're very vested in the industry. We know what's going on, and it is very well known that Portland is the premier city for streetcars. And the fact that we get to now be a part of that is a big honor for us. And so just thank you for having us here today. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of your streetcar system.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a couple questions,
Shoot,
Dan.
Taylor.
So you mentioned the reliability benefits of the Grand Avenue Transit Lane improvements. It's, always exciting to talk about new lines and expansion, but what could we do to improve our existing system to make it more reliable?
Yep. Our number one priority is always trying to make the existing system work better.
Yeah.
For me, the streetcar has to compete on convenience. And if we're running trains every 20 minutes, nobody should be expected to ride the streetcar. So what you'll hear from me, and I know it's the most expensive solution, but it's the thing that needs to get done, is we need more cars. The streetcar should be running every 10 minutes, not every 20 minutes. Otherwise, you have an investment that is not getting the most out of it. So we are aggressive in trying to figure out a funding scenario to get more vehicles on the roadway, but part of that is the Rose Lane projects. If we can speed up the streetcar, we can get more service out there. And there are a few projects out there that we can discuss about. And some of it's Rose Lane, some of it's signal timing, some of it's just scheduling and prioritization. But we have a number of small capital projects that could speed up what's out there.
Great. And then my second question is, we just celebrated the opening of the Louisa Flowers Apartments, which is an affordable housing development along the streetcar line on the east side. Are there more opportunities on the existing system for large-scale development, either for affordable housing or economic development?
Yeah, certainly. If you think about where the streetcar runs, all of your key development opportunities within the central city are on the streetcar line. You've got OMSI, you've got the ODOT blocks in the central east side, Lloyd District, certainly the Rose Quarter area, Lower Albina, and then the Broadway corridor on the west side. We serve all of those corridors. So if I was in your shoes thinking about where to make investments, where people can get housing and also have transportation costs brought down significantly, it would be along those alignments. So there's a very high quality, clean transit service running through all of those parcels. And you should be intentional about where you're putting your efforts in that regard.
I do have one more question related to the first, and I don't expect you to know this off the top of your head, but I would be really interested to know if we could truly unstuck a streetcar from traffic, how frequent we could get our existing cars running, because we know it takes years for you to build those cars for us, so it's going to take a while to add capacity in additional cars.
Yeah.
So you could...
It depends on the line.
Yeah.
And it depends on our willingness to give operators breaks, which I think we probably do.
I'm very willing to give operators breaks.
Some of this is a scheduling issue and some of it's a fleet issue. But the reality of the situation is, unless you steal 15 minutes from a cycle, what you're doing is speeding up the transit vehicle, but then increasing the amount it's going to delay at the end point. Now, we run a very unique circular transit system, which is its own thing. But our trains go in a circle all day long on the loops.
Yeah.
And so adding another vehicle into that is the easiest way to improve headways. Otherwise, you need to take 15 minutes out of that cycle time in order to improve service. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's some transportation jargon that I need to get down.
But there are things we can do to improve the schedule, for sure. We're running it takes about an hour to do the loop. If we could get that down to 45 minutes, you could do the same service with 3 trains that you do with 4.
That's great.
Okay, working on it.
Yep.
Great.
Could you also just add another train
If we had
I
them.
mean,
yeah.
another car to a train?
No, our trains don't couple, and I mean, they do for towing reasons, but they're not really designed to be two-car trains. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah. So we can tow at a very slow speed, but they're not designed to be coupled like that.
So do you make anything that's actually designed to be coupled like that?
I mean, yeah, it is. It's a different operation style, so you're not increasing frequency, but maybe capacity per vehicle by doing that. So it may or may, it just depends on what the need is. Do you need more riders per vehicle arriving, or do you need more frequency?
Well, that's my question, right? Right. Is it like they're so packed so people just decide, okay, I'm going to go and use some other mode, or
Yeah,
is
on
it
the west side, the ridership is tremendous. On the east side, if we're about 3,000 rides a day, there's plenty of capacity in the trains on the east side. What's lacking is the frequency of service, in my opinion.
Very good.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion to accept the report from Commissioner Hardesty, second from Commissioner Udaley. Any further discussion? Carla, please call the roll.
Fritz?
That was an excellent report as usual. Thank you so much. Very detailed. It's really a success, especially seeing how many affordable homes are built alongside the streetcar line. Thank you for all your work. Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Udaley?
Well, thank you for the report. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. I'm really pleased with how things are going, and I vote aye.
Wheeler?
Thanks for the report. Appreciate it very much. Thanks all for your dedication. I vote aye. Report's accepted.
Thank you.
Next item, and we are exactly spot on time. Item number 91, time certain, 10:45.
Proclaim February 5th, 2020 to be World Read Aloud Day.
Colleagues, thank you for being here today, and thank you to everyone who's here today and sharing information about World Read Aloud Day, the Children's Book Bank, and smart reading. Reading is a critical gateway skill for children, and I'm pleased that Portland is joining millions of people around the globe to bring attention and awareness to this very important event. A community's investment in early literacy is one that yields immense returns. Developing early literacy skills helps pave the way to improved education for all students, higher literacy and graduation rates, and of course, stronger communities. Today we have Afrida Davis, Program Director for Smart Reading. We have Apollonia Quayle, who's the Volunteer Manager at the Children's Book Bank, and Jessica Bowersox, who's the Communications Director at Smart. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Yeah. All right, so good morning, Mayor Wheeler.
Morning.
And commissioners. Thank you for having us today to talk about the importance of reading in children's lives in the celebration of World Read Aloud Day. My name is Afrida Davis, and I'm the Program Director of Smart Reading, a statewide children's literacy nonprofit organization based here in Portland. I've worked to serve with youth over the past decade in a variety of capacities, and working at Smart has brought me the greatest joy. My love for books was gifted to me by my mother, a strong Black woman who knew the importance of developing the love of reading in her children. Books became my best friend and my solace through the hardest times of my childhood, adolescence, and my young adult years. As a foster child who was later deployed to Iraq as an armed service member, books were how I escaped the traumatic environments that I was in. Books help me to make sense of the world around me, and it's a true privilege that I get to return that gift to kids today through my work at Smart Reading. I'd like to tell you a little bit about our organization. We provide two critical ingredients for literacy and learning success: one-on-one reading and access to books. We care about reading because we know it's a gateway skill for kids, and without that skill, kids are less likely to graduate high school, find employment, or successfully avoid other hardships throughout their lives. Lower literacy rates don't just hurt individual children, they hurt us all. They impact the future health and prosperity of our community. Based on the ODE assessment data from last year, about 45% of all third graders in Portland Public Schools weren't meeting state reading benchmarks. For students of color, students learning English, and those experiencing poverty or homelessness, the numbers are far more bleak. This is not acceptable, and our community can and needs to help solve these issues. Literacy is not just our education system's challenge, but one for local community, businesses, foundations, congregations, and neighbors. The proverb says it takes a village to raise a child, and that's why we do our work at Smart Reading and why we're here today to bring awareness to the critical responsibility to support kids and to build brighter futures through reading. Thank you for supporting World Read Aloud Day and helping us to get that message out to that reading matters by helping thousands of children build confidence, literacy skills, and a love of reading in their own neighborhoods. We can reduce the negative rippling effects of illiteracy and help children realize their full potential. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners, thank you for having us here today to talk about the importance of early literacy and World Read Aloud Day. I'm Apollonia Qualley, and I'm the volunteer manager for the Children's Book Bank, and I've also volunteered at SMART as a coordinator for the past 5 years. It's no wonder I've ended up so involved in early literacy as an adult, given how important books were to me as a child. I moved around a lot, and books were my first friends. They gave me a sense of home and belonging when I didn't have that in my daily life. Now, as a parent of 2 children, I've experienced the magic of books through their eyes. They have 2 very different experiences with learning how to read, and my involvement with SMART and with the Children's Book Bank prepared me to advocate for them and to help them find success with reading and to see themselves as readers today. To share a bit about the Children's Book Bank, we're a nonprofit organization with a mission to fill children's homes with beautiful, engaging books, and we focus on services on children experiencing poverty, as 61% of families living in poverty lack books at home. Academically, children growing up in homes without books are on average 3 years behind children with books in their home. This year, we'll give away 122,000 books to kids throughout Multnomah County from preschool to 8th grade, with a strong emphasis on providing books that really represent the diverse world that we're living in, and books that represent characters of color, LGBTQ representation, and children of all abilities. We often partner with SMART to work together to bring the gift of books and literacy to kids. In fact, at a special World Read Aloud Day celebration in Hillsborough, we're going to be giving 620 books, enough books to serve every single student throughout the school. Thank you again for providing space to celebrate today. Reading is a fundamental skill that opens doors and opportunities and choices for children, and it's important that we support all kids in mastering this essential skill. I encourage our community to celebrate World Read Aloud today and every day of the year.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. Thank you so much for taking the time to hear from us today about the importance of early literacy. My name is Jessica Bowersox, and I'm the Communications Director at Smart Reading, and I've also been a SMART volunteer for 10 years. You've heard a bit about our organization already from Afrida, but I'd like to share a couple additional points as well. So this year in the Portland metro area, we have about 1,600 volunteers who are going to help us read with 3,300 students across the area and about 100 sites. We'll also give these children 40,000 books throughout the course of the school year. Statewide, we have 5,000 volunteers who help us do this work in just about every community across the state, and we will serve 11,000 students across Oregon this year. I wanted to share that recently we learned that Smart Reading has been named a program of distinction by Generations United, which is a DC-based advocacy group that works with intergenerational programs. And SMART is one of only 2 organizations in Oregon to receive this designation, the other being Bridge Meadows. We measure our impact by inviting feedback from volunteers, educators that we work with, and families we serve throughout the course of each year. And based on that, we know that 88% of kids in our program show improvement in their confidence in reading skills. 83% of kids in our program show improved social and emotional skills. And 93% of families with children in our program say that their children benefited significantly from the engagement in Smart Reading. Importantly, reading with children isn't just about the literacy skills, it's an opportunity to create some wonderful relationships. I will never forget the first time I missed a Smart Reading session, my very first year as a volunteer, and I thought the kids I read with would not even notice that I was gone, and I was wrong. When I came back the next week, one of the girls I read with put her hand on her hip and she said, "Where were you?" And I realized in that moment They notice, they pay attention, and it matters to show up for them week after week. And I really realized the responsibility I had to not let this little person down. So today, Portland is joining millions around the globe in celebrating World Read Aloud Day, or RAD, as we like to call it. And RAD is an observance led by a nonprofit out of New York City called Lit World that advocates for literacy as a fundamental human right for all. This is the first year that Smart Reading has joined this observance, and we thank you for joining in it with us, and we really look forward to how the celebration can expand in years to come and invite you all to be part of that with us. For those in our community who are interested in getting involved, we encourage you to pick up a book, read with a child, maybe volunteer to become a smart reader, and really just want to share that literacy is a true community effort and we can all support kids in their journey to become readers. So thank you again for joining us in the celebration of World Read Aloud Day and helping us show our community that reading matters.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, all three of you.
The bookstore owner would probably want to go first.
Yes, I'm feeling a little verklempt. I mean, World Read Out Loud Day sounds like, a fun event, but it's really deep and meaningful. And like you, books were my first friends, and dang it, not again.
That's okay, we got you.
Yeah, growing up in rural Oregon in a pretty isolated area, books were my first friend. Books were my refuge from, tough life experiences, and books were my window onto a world that I could only dream of belonging to. Books also became my occupation. I was a bookseller for most of my adult life before I came to city council. And there really are few things more beautiful than getting to watch a child learn how to read. That transition from reading to them reading to you.
Yeah.
I accidentally, I guess unconsciously named my son after one of my favorite children's book characters, Henry Alden from the Boxcar Children, which was a very influential series on me. I would have loved to live in a Boxcar Children, or in a boxcar in the woods as a kid. I did do a SMART orientation. I'm looking forward to the day where I can make that weekly commitment without letting the kids down, but I'm not there yet. So thank you. Thank you for being there for them.
I also want to add my appreciation as I listened to Afrida talk about her lived experience. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, one of 10 kids. And books was the way that I got away from my siblings, right?
Exactly.
It was my way to really escape
Yeah.
into my own world. In fact, the librarian knew me by name. And I was that little nerdy kid that always had 8 or 10 books stacked like this because that was my weekend reading.
Every day.
Let me say it serves me well in my current position. Because the homework that I take home and have to read is significant.
Yeah.
I think the best thing you can do for a young person is to give them access to books.
Absolutely.
Because as a young black child growing up in Baltimore, without books, I would have never known there was this huge world out there.
Mm-hmm.
And Baltimore was not the world. It was just a city I lived in, right?
Exactly.
And so I appreciate what you do. And like Commissioner Udaley, our life here doesn't allow us to make a commitment for once a week. But I want you to invite me to do something. I remember a couple of years, I actually did a read out loud event, a couple of them events. One was poetry and one was something else. But I love seeing that sparkle in young people's eyes. And thank you very much. And let me just tell our listeners, start making a reader today. Is that still what SMART stands for, or have you just done away with the acronym and now it's just SMART?
It still stands for Start Making a Reader Today, but we have officially changed our name to Smart Reading.
See, you learn something new every day if you read. Thank you all.
Thank you.
That was beautiful.
Nice.
And she's here all day, folks. On behalf of the city of Portland, I want to thank you for all the work that you do, bringing the gift of books and reading to literally thousands of children throughout our community. And I want to thank you for that. And I look forward to watching the annual observance of World Read Aloud Day and watch it grow and gain gain momentum both in our community as well as around the country. So thank you for your tremendous commitment. It's now my honor to read on behalf of the City Council a proclamation celebrating your efforts. Whereas reading is an early gateway skill that paves the pathway for future success, and whereas lower literacy rates don't just hurt individual children, they're a huge concern for the future health and prosperity of our community and our state. And whereas the third grade reading level is a key indicator of a child's future educational success, yet nearly half of Portland's third graders aren't meeting this critical benchmark. And whereas by providing our children with one-on-one reading support, access to books, and building their confidence, literacy skills, and a love of reading, we can reduce the negative ripple effects of illiteracy and help children realize their full potential. And whereas World Read Aloud Day is an opportunity for people in Portland and across the globe to celebrate the joy of reading aloud and advocate for literacy as a fundamental human right that belongs to everyone. And whereas, in recognition of Smart Reading's efforts since 1992 to engage 140,000 Oregonians to offer over 222,000 Oregon children reading support and 2.8 million books, putting them on a path to strong literacy skills that yields lifelong benefits and opportunities. Now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim February 5th, 2020 to be World Read Aloud Day in Portland and encourage all Portland residents to observe this day. Thank you. And
Yes. That's all we have.
it's all we have, and it's your reputation, so here, we'll just do it here.
What a pleasure. I'm a Navy vet.
I know.
Thank you.
Stepping all over your foot.
I knew it was either going to be quality.
So Amanda, should I hold your picture up in front of you?
Sure, go ahead.
Wait, somebody has to hold that.
Okay, yes.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming.
Congratulations, you get to keep that.
Oh my gosh, yes, I know, yes.
Best form.
And you know, we got.
Hey.
Appreciate it. We'll make sure we get you to a reading.
Yeah. Just was reminded that I did not woman called one couple years ago. Oh, we got you. Yeah, especially with the kids.
I should read aloud today. I'm allowed to read. Okay, next up. 101.
A sticker for you. Oh, a sticker, right? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Is it for, want me to pass them down?
Oh, I got one.
Oh, you got one?
I got one.
Apparently I was meant to have two.
Okay, we already did. So next up are items 92 and 93, please.
92, amend the introduction, modal plans, implementation strategies, and glossary chapters of the 2035 Transportation System Plan. And 93, amend the 2035 Transportation System Plan and the 2035 Comprehensive Plan in compliance with the Regional Transportation Plan, adopt findings of compliance.
Commissioner Udaly, any further thoughts?
No.
Very good. Colleagues, just to remind you, We continued this discussion, the resolution. We've already had a presentation and testimony. Similarly with item 93, the ordinance, we already heard a presentation, we heard testimony, and we voted on amendments. So we're ready to take a final vote unless there's any further business on either. Carla, please call the roll on item number 92.
Fritz.
Aye.
Hardesty. Aye. Udaley.
I want to thank PBOT staff for their work, especially Bob Kellett and Eric Hesse, in updating the 2035 Transportation System Plan. I'm pleased that we're updating this long-range planning document to reflect the recommendations of more recently adopted plans. This is something we will need to continue to do as conditions change and new opportunities emerge. I also want to thank the community members who have volunteered their valuable time to help shape the recommendations in this update. This is not the end of this work. We ask that you continue to stay engaged with us as the policies and projects in this plan are implemented and as we move forward with planning work that is rooted in equity. I also want to thank city staff at other bureaus, including BPS, BDS, Parks, and the Fire Bureau. Transportation touches all of us, and the decisions that we make should be coordinated so that we're achieving multiple city goals. In fact, I want to be clear to the public and our partner bureaus that PBOT staff will begin implementing regulations in the TSP update this summer. This will provide time for the public and our partners to dig deep into the plan and prepare their development proposals and inspection trainings. I am pleased to vote aye.
Wheeler.
I appreciated the presentation and the testimony. I vote aye. The resolution is adopted. Item number 93, which is the ordinance is amended. Please call the roll.
Fritz.
Aye.
Hardesty. Aye. Udaley.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted as amended. Next item, please, will be regular agenda item 101.
Appoint new members Taji Chesamit and Jamari Etherly, and alternate member Thabiti Lewis to the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing.
Colleagues, the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing continues to do outstanding work, and it's done so for well over a year now. Most recently, the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing forwarded 2 recommendations to me and the Portland Police Bureau with suggestions for how to improve procedural justice and implementation of a body camera pilot program. These reflect thoughtful work and dedication by the PSEP on important issues and will carefully review and respond to all of these recommendations. PSEP also recommended appointments of new members at its most recent meeting I attended, and PSEP suggested immediate appointment of 2 outstanding young adults to the committee. The first candidate is Taji Chesmet, a senior at De La Salle North Catholic High School, who has served on the Multnomah Youth Commission and as a youth representative on the City of Portland's 3.96 Code Change Committee. The second candidate is Jamari Etherly, a senior at Benson Polytechnic High School, who is very involved with Word is Bond as a community ambassador and who is also a dedicated athlete in the sport of boxing. As you know, PSEP is comprised of a group of dedicated and diverse community members who devote considerable time, effort, energy, and attention to improving police services and engagement with the community in Portland. We're very pleased that the 2 co-chairs, Lakiana Jury and Andrew Culloch, are with us today to update the council report on PSEP's status and activities. I'm happy now to invite Lakiana and Andrew to give their presentation. Welcome. Thank you both for being here. Thanks all 3 of you.
Lakiana, I'm going to do this for your mom. Fix your collar.
Which part of it, right here?
The other side, yeah.
Thank
All right,
you.
there you go, yeah.
I'll tell my mom that she appreciates that.
Now you're looking good. Your mom's going to be a good boy, right?
The only reason mine is appropriate is because my mother is visiting. So
There you go.
somebody's already told me about it this morning, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the council for your support for the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing and PSEP. We really have a lot of folks to thank for our work over the last 18 months. That includes not only you, but many members of the Portland Police Bureau, including Chief Resch, who was at our last meeting and who's expressed her continued willingness and dare I say, excitement to continue the work that they've done with us. We've also had great meetings with, including public meetings with the president of the PPA, the Portland Police Association, Daryl Turner, so we thank you for his work with us. We have a tremendous staff that supports us day in and day out. And last but certainly not least, we have had so many meetings, and Lakiana will talk about this, with community groups and other individuals, thought leaders of every stripe from across the community who are sharing their wisdom with us. Because it's really not about us, the 13 of us on the committee, talking to the people of the city of Portland. It's really figuring out a way to get all of their wisdom and transmit that back to the city and the police bureau, and that continues to be our goal. So I'm going to hand it over to Lakiana, who's going to talk a little bit more about our community engagement efforts to date.
Yeah, so thank you for having us. I just want to quickly start just separating that I'm speaking on behalf of PSEP and my lead as a co-chair, not on Word is Bond or any other efforts that I'm engaged in the community. Just want to start with our successes. Word is Bond. Right where I said that. PSEP is doing extremely well right now. We, for the first time in a number of months, have 13 members, all of our seats filled. You're going to hear from our youth in a little bit. We actually have 3 youth sitting on the council right now. The document only requires 2, but we were able to add 3, and I think that just speaks to the level of engagement that we're bringing. And I really want to frame the community engagement effort. I think it goes a little bit under the radar, and it includes a number of different things. You know, the piece that a lot of folks have been focusing on is people coming to the meetings, but that's just part of the community engagement that happens with PSEP. It includes events that we attend. It includes one-on-one meetings. We went through and cataloged all of our meetings that our members attended outside of our monthly meeting, and it averaged out to 3 meetings per committee member. So our members are out there, they're in the community, so it's not just what we're seeing at the meetings, but it involves many other things, and I just want to highlight that as we're framing this discussion around community engagement. We'll talk about that a little more in the challenges of as one of the things of how do we get more folks to our meetings, but our mentality right now is that we have to go meet the community where they're at. A lot of these members are coming from disenfranchised communities with working mothers and fathers that aren't able to devote 3 hours to sit at another meeting. So our efforts involve getting out to them and also producing results that speak to the issues that are most important to them. Some of the other community engagement things we've done, working with PPB on their community engagement plan, made recommendations for that during our first year, including the Truth and Reconciliation recommendation, which is something that Chief Resch has talked about. And that's really the start of this process of healing, because until we rectify and really come to terms with what's happened in the past, it's really hard to move forward and say, let's just turn over a new leaf without really acknowledging the hurt and trauma that was caused in the past. So from a community engagement perspective, that's really where we're at with that right now. Want to turn over now to our recommendations, things that we've just done. Mayor Wheeler, you just mentioned the procedural justice recommendation. Really proud of how that came together and the input that we got. We talked to members of PPB, we talked to community members at our subcommittee meetings, and that's PSEP's first policy recommendation that we've produced. A lot of our other recommendations have been either plans or their recommendations for various things, but I think this is a really unique opportunity for Chief Resch to take in the perceptions of the community. As a police bureau, they're only able to see what they're able to see from their perspective, and so that's where we can assist and complement the work that they're already doing through the efforts of the settlement agreement and of a lot of the steps they've taken by adding in that community voice to all of that. And so this recommendation, I believe, would radically change how police and community members interact in a stop or a search. I hear daily from the youth I work with and from community members that a lot of times when they're stopped or when they're searched, they don't know the officer's name who's searching them. They don't know if they're even have to be detained or what the reason for the stop was. And so this recommendation, if implemented, would change that by giving more voice to the community members. It's one of the things that Chief Outlaw had championed, and I know Chief Resch wants to continue on that progress. So we're really keen to see her take this seriously and implement this as a recommendation from our body. The other one we just passed in January was our body camera recommendation. It's not an endorsement of body cameras, but it is a set of guidelines from a number of community meetings that we had to help shape a future body camera project if that does in fact take place, and we'll be talking tomorrow more about that. I'll turn it back over to Andrew now to talk about facial recognition, and then we'll touch briefly on the youth survey.
Yeah, in addition to...
One second, Andrew.
Sure,
Commissioner
yeah, of course.
Hardesty had a question. Thank you, Lakia.
Thank you. I just want to take this opportunity to tell you how much I appreciate your service on this committee. The work
Thank
that
you.
you've done, and of course, I hear from the community a lot. I want to be clear, I had no confidence in this committee at all, right? I didn't believe that this was going to be a committee that really was going to dig into the hard questions around policing, that this committee would have the ability to push back against certified smart people who think they know better what policing should look like in the city of Portland. And I want to take this opportunity to say I was absolutely, totally wrong. With the work that you are doing is revolutionary. The fact that you are engaging with young people where they are and making sure that their voices are centered in every conversation you have. I've watched you facilitate. You and I have had conversations. You and I have met. But I just need to, on the public record, say that I was totally wrong. And the work that you're doing is really going to make a difference in the city of Portland. And I want to thank you very much for your service.
Appreciate that, Commissioner.
Yeah, that means a lot. And we recognize that we are standing on the shoulders of folks who have been in this community for generations who have done this work, whether it's the Mental Health Alliance or the Albino Ministerial Alliance that brought the initial lawsuit, and countless others. So we're trying to do our little part, but we appreciate that vote of confidence, and we'll try not to let you down. A couple other things, in addition to the policy notes that Lakiana mentioned, we've tried to engage the community through events, but also through surveys and the like. So Commissioner Hardesty, you joined us, headlined our event on facial recognition technology. We were also joined by the ACLU of Oregon, the Urban League, the Business Alliance, many others, again, showing what we're trying to do for outreach in the community. So thank you for attending that, and we look forward to additional forums like that. Our youth subcommittee is engaged with Portland Public Schools on a survey, which again is a great tool to use to see what it is that youth care about in this arena and how we can go about tackling it. So they should be issuing that survey either in the first quarter or shortly thereafter. So we're excited about that as well. That's all.
Yeah, the last piece is a youth survey. So the youth subcommittee is one of our 4 subcommittees that's up and working right now. And they are working on a survey to, as we already said, we're centering youth voice, but there's even more that can be dug up and pulled into these conversations. So they're busy working on that. And with the addition of 2 new youth on the committee, I believe that will be strengthened. I don't know if we want to hear from them now. Do we want to? Yeah, so I'm going to turn it over to them. I'll just say that we just added both their seats in at January's meeting. It brings our committee back up to being fully staffed. Both of these young men have done incredible work already in the community outside of being on PSEP. And so I think this is just another step in their leadership journeys and also a step for us as a committee to get more lived experience and authentic voices on our committee. So I will turn it over to them.
Welcome. Your name for the record, you can have that one if you want.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler. Like mentioned by Lakiana, my name is Taji Chesamit, and I am a recently appointed member of PSEP, and hopefully will be sworn in today, I believe. And I just wanted to share my amazing and excitement for what's going to be happening as a new member of the youth of PSEP, and so we can really continue to move the work forward on the youth subcommittee and continue to work forward. Having youth voice on this committee is very pivotal to understanding perspectives that are missed from adults, but also seen from the experiences that I'm bringing from my own work that I do in my nonprofit called Youth Educating Police, really just expanding the work I'm doing there, along with being able to participate on PSEP, will be extremely exciting to see how we can connect the two works and how we can continue to grow community engagement, like mentioned by our co-chairs. So I'm very excited today to be here, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Hi, I'm Jamari Etherly. I'm glad to be a part of PSEP, and from my work with Word is Bond throughout the summer and school year, it helped me help break barriers between like law enforcement and the youth of color, and I wanted to be a part of PSEP so I can give like the kids that I represent in like communities of color a voice.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you both to the new PSEF members. I'm curious whether or not, when you bring issues to the committee, does it feel like the committee is really listening to those issues and digging into them, and you feel like they want to do something about those concerns?
Yes, because at the last meeting that I went to, they really touched on like bringing more people in and like more of the kids into, and with having youth members on the board, it's going to help bring the youth into the program and help them get involved.
Right.
I believe there's some definite intentionality along with the community engagement PSEP's been bringing, and I also think that having the young people on this committee will be able to bring a lot more perspective. Got to give a lot of kudos to Lakiana and his attempts to bring some of his Word is Bond and previous students, but there's a sort of different perspective that young people specifically can bring to get, our own peers to the room and have our own perspectives heard. And I think throughout the time when I was able to participate in this meeting, along with getting the youth survey initially, just to like see our insights before it was published to the public, was really cool to see how they wanted to just engage this population without sort of already getting that question or pushback from young people to get in the room. And it was great to have a lot of opportunity to public comment on each of the recommendations. And there's some really good insights from adults and youth alike on how we can, make sure this work is intentionally reaching as many communities and a lot of those disenfranchised communities, like mentioned by Lakiana before. So yes, I think this is.
Well, what I appreciate is I think because of Lakiana's background with Word is Bond, he understands how to engage young people at a really deep level. The other thing that I appreciate is your ability to not be silenced by information that adults may not want to hear. I've read some articles and actually observed some dialogue and interactions, and was so impressed with your ability to hold your ground and say, this is what the committee thinks, and this is what the committee recommends, and because it's not your job if people don't take your recommendations, but it's certainly your job to make sure that we know exactly what the community wants and expects from your work. So it takes a lot of courage to do that, and it's rare to find young people willing to just say, I don't care if you like it, here it is. So thank you very much for that. I am grateful. Lots of love today, I tell you.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all
What's
good.
going on? Is this all a dream?
I'm gonna wake up and I'll be yelling at the mayor. Back to a normal day. Moving on.
Moving right on. All right, so this is a report. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Hardesty and a second from Commissioner Udaly. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Fritz?
Well, thank you very much for your willingness to serve. This is a very significant community volunteer opportunity, and I really appreciate all the work that's been done. It is satisfying to know that we are making progress and that the DOJ, the Department of Justice, is having us move towards substantial compliance. I know there's still some discussion about that and still more work to do as we continue to be monitored. But I really credit Mayor Wheeler and his staff, particularly Nicole Grant and Robert King, for their support, and also the Office of Equity and Human Rights and their support of the committee. Aye.
Hardesty?
I think I may have said all the gushy things that I want to say. Let me just say that continue to build the committee to continue to do the work that you're doing, and do not hesitate to reach out if there's something me or my office can do to support your efforts. I vote aye.
Udaly?
Can we turn that off?
Yeah, if you can hit that, Lakiana. It's the big one. There you go. Thanks. She'll call back.
Well, I want to thank you for your work on this committee. I shared some of Commissioner Hardesty's concerns. The DOJ settlement has been one of the most complicated and frustrating issues that I've and expensive, dealt with since coming to City Council. I want to especially thank the youth members for stepping up. These are not meetings that a lot of adults would want to be involved in. So I commend you. And also Taji, it's always exciting to see you again. I really appreciate your service on MYC and the Code Change Committee. And this is meaningful work. This isn't school. You know, you're contributing real, meaningful, valuable perspective to this committee, and that's really exciting. I can't wait to see what happens and what you guys do next, because I know you're both seniors and you might be moving on sometime soon. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
We do, but at
Wheeler?
least- yeah.
Well, thank you all. I'm very, very grateful for the work that PSEP has done to provide community oversight of the DOJ settlement agreement and the compliance officers reporting, and also to contribute to the development of PPB's community engagement plan. It's worth underscoring again that although the city is now determined to be in substantial compliance with the United States Department of Justice settlement agreement, we are far from done. There's a lot of work yet to be done. And I am very happy that PSEP is taking up the call in a very meaningful way. PSEP is, from my perspective, functioning extremely well, and I believe it's going to play an important role well beyond the life of the settlement agreement. And it's going to continue to help both the city and the Portland Police Bureau to engage with the community on all manner of issues that are of critical importance. So I'm very happy to support this, obviously, but I also want to acknowledge some people who are not here today, many of whom played an important role. Chief Outlaw was deeply committed to the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, as is Chief Resch, and you saw that, I'm sure, in her presentation to you last week. I do want to acknowledge also somebody who is here, Jared Hager, who doesn't get much credit. He's here today. He's representing the United States Department of Justice, and I want to thank him for his insight and input and support. Tracy Reeve, our city attorney, spends a considerable amount of time on this. The Office of Equity and Human Rights has been deeply engaged. I also want to thank Robert King and Nicole Grant for their continued work on my team to keep the process moving forward, and of course, my Chief of Staff, Kristen Dennis. But most importantly, I want to thank you. The pay's not good. As Commissioner Hardesty and Commissioner Udaly said, this is real business, and it is serious business. And you've gone all in on it, and you've provided the level of maturity and respect and dedication that this important set of issues deserves. And it is worth noting, colleagues, that these two young men not only had to make the case in an interview process, they actually had to do the interview process in public in an open meeting in front of the entire world. And I was impressed with both of them beyond belief. So we're lucky to have them stepping forward as well as our alternate. I'm very happy to vote aye. The report is accepted. Continue the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like a picture with us?
Always.
That was the right answer. I was waiting for him to go for what?
Andrew's always the diplomat there.
Why don't we come back over here? It's just more room.
I can get a picture with the big wigs.
Congratulations. For real. Congratulations. We really appreciate it.
Yep, thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Commissioner. It's good to see you.
I don't know, I guess we should really want me here.
Right, yeah.
Perfect, all right. I like it. You should get over here too.
Yeah, Theo.
Hey, how are you?
All right, you did it. Thank you. I just want you to know you did this for your
And I gotta tell you, I love that blue. That just pops, right? So, well done. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I love nerds.
What? Can't she just call her? It's just a phone line. Well, how did it get to, I assumed it got to, okay.
Oh, nice to see you. Thank you.
Okay, you're back on, good. Okay. All right. Oh, this one, Jesus. They're smart kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, do we, let's keep moving on, folks.
Excuse
All
me,
right.
wonderful people, we gotta go back to work. Thank you.
Okay, next item, 102, please.
Authorize city attorney to appeal judgment in Alan Lloyd Kessler v. City of Portland, Multnomah County Circuit Court, number 18CV 43134.
Colleagues, I, like you, am committed to transparency in the city's handling of public records and improving the way we respond to public records requests throughout our city bureaus. That means keeping the cost reasonable. That means reducing any barriers to access as reasonable. The city attorney's office has made a clear case for why an appeal is necessary to the city to be able to comply with the intent of the judge's ruling. The public also needs clarity so that they know what to expect when making a public records request for which we can be held accountable. I support the appeal so that we can get this clarity. In the last 3 years, we've made improvements on how we handle public records requests, including hiring more personnel in the bureaus who are dedicated to the task, making technological improvements, and updating internal processes and lowering, or even in many cases, waiving fees. We will continue to make improvements, and I look forward to the city being able to get the clarity we need to ensure that we are appropriately handling the approximately 30,000 public records requests that we receive each year. I'm going to go off my talking points for just one moment and say this. We are not thumbing our nose at Mr. Kessler or the judge. What we need is clarity to the specific legal requirements that were in the ruling. And those of us who are not attorneys, the way we would resolve that is we would pick up the phone and we would call and say, hey, what did you mean by this? That is not how it works in court. In order to get that level of clarity, we have to go back before the judge and seek that clarity. And so, again, the purpose here isn't to say the judge was wrong or that Mr. Kessler is wrong. This is the process which we must go through in order to secure that clarity on some very specific legal matters. And with that, I'll turn it over to staff, who actually are lawyers.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. My name's Karen Moynihan. I'm Chief Deputy City Attorney in the City Attorney's Office. We're asking Council today to authorize the City Attorney to file an appeal of the Multnomah County Circuit Court decision in the matter of Alan Kessler v. City of Portland. As the Mayor stated, the primary purpose that we seek this appeal is for clarification of the Circuit Court's ruling so the city can fully comply with the terms of the judgment, which we believe contains some vague and ambiguous provisions. In very short summary, because the facts are important, in August of 2018, Mr. Kessler filed a public records request seeking metadata related to certain city emails. Senior Deputy City Attorney Jennifer Johnston, who, as you know, handles legal matters related to public records, tried to find out if we actually could produce emails in the metadata format. She went to BTS. BTS researched the issue and said, no, they actually don't keep emails in metadata format. Ms. Johnston then contacted Mr. Kessler and offered to give him the emails in their native format. Mr. Kessler, as is his right, declined and sought an appeal with the district attorney. The district attorney agreed with the city that it did not have to produce documents in a format that it did not keep, and ordered the city to provide Mr. Kessler with the emails in whatever format we hold those emails, and to do so within a certain time frame. The city did that. 4 weeks later, the city produced all of the non-privileged records to Mr. Kessler. Mr. Kessler then, and at that time, the city had billed Mr. Kessler $311 for his public record search. Mr. Kessler filed a suit in circuit court alleging that the city had not given him all of the documents, asking for the documents in metadata format, and also saying that the city's production was untimely and the city had overcharged him for the records. We went to trial. After trial, the court issued a decision and actually found in the city's favor in all of the claims, except the court did find that Mr. Kessler was correct, that the city had overcharged him. Now, with respect to that allegation, there's two important points for you to understand today. First, Mr. Kessler had asserted that the city overcharged him for 15 minutes of work that it had not actually provided, and that the salary of the individual who performed the record search was actually about $10 less than what Mr. Kessler was billed for. And prior to trial, we looked at that issue and we agreed that Mr. Kessler was correct. We calculated what the difference was, what he was overcharged, and in abundance of caution, we cut him a check for $52, which was far above what the overpayment actually was. The second point with respect to billing is that the judge ruled that BTS uses what she believes are overqualified employees to perform the searches and therefore charged Mr. Kessler too much. The judge ordered the city to recalculate the fee that it charged Mr. Kessler using the lowest hourly rate charged by any department personnel who could be responsible for responding to the public records request. The city has since recalculated that difference and found that the $52 that it had previously paid Mr. Kessler prior to trial adequately also covered him for that overcharge. The city attorney's office is particularly concerned that the judge's order enjoins the city from charging what it termed to be excessive fees because it could subject the city to contempt proceedings for any erroneous overcalculation or if a judge disagrees with the city's designation of which employee conducts a public records email search. It's also important to note that Mr. Kessler has filed a claim for attorney's fees in the amount of $120,000 to compensate him for winning on the claim that the city overcharged him by $52, which again, we reimbursed prior to trial. Therefore, we're seeking authorization to file an appeal so we may seek clarification of the court's judgment to ensure that city bureaus are fully complying with the spirit and the letter of the Oregon Public Records Act. And with that, Ms. Johnston will explain what measures the city has taken to reduce the cost of record searches to the public.
As this council knows, it authorized the city attorney's office to have a city attorney work full-time on public records issues. As part of that, I provide training to members of every bureau so that they understand this council's direction, that we want public records provided quickly, we want to increase transparency, and we want to comply with the legal standard that the presumption is that records should be disclosed. I meet with them at least monthly, if not more frequently, to provide that training. As part of that, we've also implemented an online records request system to make records more accessible to everyone, but we also have an online helpline in case there are people who have difficulty using the online system, because we also want to keep equitable issues in mind, and we don't want our records to be inaccessible just because someone cannot access a computer system. Council also, in the last budget cycle, authorized the city attorney's office to hire another person to focus on assisting in electronic record searches, particularly text and email searches, and we would be able to waive the fees associated with those collections, and we are in the process of hiring that person. That will also allow us to run test searches to better narrow requests so that we can reduce cost for review time and better provide the records that people are actually seeking and not records that are less useful to them. The city has also invested in additional technologies and programs to better review and collect documents, again, so that we can provide people the records they want and not spend or charge them for reviewing unresponsive records. While we are working on hiring that person, BTS in the meantime has changed the way it calculates refunds to make sure we're refunding any overcharges. Additionally, it is charging the lowest rate for a person available to perform searches regardless of who actually does it. There are times that the city in its judgment decides to have a higher skilled person with better skills and professional capacity perform certain aspects of a search, but we still charge the lower rate. So that is also reducing the cost of those searches. As you know, the Police Bureau has also waived fees for crime victims when they're requesting police reports. The Police Bureau and Bureau of Development Services offer economic fee waivers, which are not required by law, but also assist people who need records, but it would cause them an economic hardship to pay for those records. All bureaus grant public interest fee waivers. Most bureaus that can complete a request in 30 minutes or less also waive those fees. All bureaus that charge prepaid fees based on a time study for those fees are in the process of reviewing the fees to update the fee schedule by June. Bureaus do this periodically as employee salaries changes, but also as efficiencies for gathering those records change in the hopes that we'll be able to reduce those prepaid fees as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Commissioner Daly.
Thank you, Mayor. My only question is about efficiencies you mentioned. It's my understanding that our systems pose some challenges that potentially make those searches more difficult and lengthy. Is that something you could speak to?
When we moved to Office 365, it actually decreased the fees for those searches. Before Office 365, we had to individually search each person's email box. And so your ability to, for example, ask for a search for all the emails in Commissioner Daly's office, that was fairly expensive because each email box would have to be searched individually. The bureaus that are on Office 365, which is all bureaus excluding the Police Bureau, we can now search, do group searches in one search. So we can now do that much more quickly and upload those. So I would disagree that some of that technology has made things more expensive, and what I have seen has made it much more cheap, and we're getting lots more searches for that. The other thing is, before the city implemented a text archive system to search for someone's text messages, we would have to obtain their phone, download it, and then search for their text messages. That was very time-consuming and quite expensive. Because the city invested in a text message archive system, we can now search for those text messages much more cheaply and quickly and make those available much more cheaply. And again, because this council authorized a person to do those collections, once that person is hired, the time spent collecting those records, we're going to be able to waive those fees and not charge for that time, doing those searches and gathering those records. Does that?
So we've made improvements even just in the last couple of years.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
And we continually look for different ways to do that. And as part of the training and my work with the bureaus, we're also looking for things we can proactively post. The idea being the more information we can make available to the public that they can self-serve. And there are lots of bureaus that have initiatives to do that so that the public can access records in that way. So they don't even have to make a public records request. I mean, probably one of our greatest long-term points of that is our e-file system with all of our council documents and lots of other documents. But there's lots of other examples where bureaus are actively working to figure out ways that we can make records available to post. It's just that, one of the areas that people want records, which are emails and text, are not going to be available on e-files, and so we are going to have to continue to search them. But we have also bought new technology to enable us to do those searches more efficiently, narrow down those requests better, and instead of getting 5,000 records where only 500 of them actually are responsive, and we had to look through all 5,000, our technology will enable us to narrow it down to those 500, only review those 500 for the limited exemptions under the law, and then provide them. And the reason we do still review for those exemptions is most city employees view the information that the public has provided to us as something of a public trust. And there is confidential information that the public provides us. And we don't want to inadvertently release information about a sex abuse victim or someone who's come forward bravely with a complaint so that we can investigate it to make our city better. And then we release that information and something negative happens to that person. And so we do believe that taking the time to look at the records to make sure that we aren't betraying that trust is time that we need to invest as a city.
So with the 30-minute forgiveness, or however we characterize that, a number of these requests end up being free. Is that correct?
Yes.
And can you give me a sense of percentage?
I don't have a percentage off the top of my head. I can tell you that the greatest number of fees are paid by commercial requesters to the Portland Police Bureau. And for the rest of the bureaus, the amount of fees they take in is less. I will also tell you, as part of the fee review project we're undergoing, the bureaus are investigating whether or not they can raise that waiver amount. It's just that with the economic situation that we have, we want to balance that fee waiver against the other interests that the council has, so that, you know, that direction is not causing a budget impact that y'all don't want.
That gets to my final question, which is, if we did raise that threshold, say, to an hour, I would want to know what percentage of the requests would be covered within that hour, and also what the estimated costs would be. I don't expect you to be able to answer that today, but those are two things that I'm going to need to take into consideration.
We've asked the bureaus to start looking into that, and we have not been tracking the records request in that way, so it's difficult to pull out the data in quite that way.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. Commissioner Udele made me think of another question. So, is it different if it's an individual requesting information than if there's a commercial interest that's requesting information?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the law does not treat those people differently, and we don't, in many circumstances, get to ask why you're making the request. However, the public interest fee waiver, which asks, you know, whether you're making a request in the public's interest, generally, most commercial requesters could not meet those standards. The voluntary fee waivers that the city has set up for economic fee waivers, most commercial requesters could not meet those. So that's a voluntary program that the city has set up that's not required by law. And so in those circumstances, we do look at individuals who, as I said, need the records, but it would cause them an economic hardship. And like the Police Bureau and BDS, you know, try and waive those costs in those cases. I should also say for BDS, if you go into the permit center and you're an owner or occupant, you can get your the permits on your home for free, which is another way, again, that people who are members of the public and not commercial requesters can get those records for free.
I have to say, I'm concerned about the electronic access, because we just heard this week there's a city in Oregon who had spyware and their entire computer systems are compromised. And so I absolutely believe in transparency, certainly want the public to have access to information, certainly want us to be reasonable when it comes to putting a cost on it. And I do think that there are categories that we should just not be charging people for that information. And so the question that will be asked of the court is what?
For the appeal?
Yes.
Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. We're going to ask the court to clarify what exactly are the requirements with respect to clarify what is excessive fees. Because we do have a question, since the court, in the judge's opinion, she actually said that the BTS employees who are running these searches were actually too highly paid to do that. And one of the concerns that BTS has, which is a very critical concern, they require that the folks who run these citywide searches actually have security clearances and training, because as you can imagine, they're looking at every single city email, including confidential attorney-client, again, the sex victims, that sort of thing. So BTS already believes that the employees it has running these searches, if they charge at the lowest salary for a qualified employee, that's sufficient. But we do need clarity from the court, because the way the opinion reads, it truly could be any BTS employee, and we have confidence that someone can be trained. It's the security clearance that's more of a concern. That's one of the issues. The other issue is the fact that the court's issued an injunction against us from charging excessive fees. That's a bit problematic because, first of all, there's a lot of case law that a court can't enjoin a city or a government to comply with the law, that's a presumption that a government will comply with the law. How that plays out is if, for example, there is a question as to whether a fee is excessive, rather than going through the process that's laid out in the Public Records Act, going to the district attorney, then going to circuit court, a litigant can go straight to circuit court and say, City of Portland has overcharged me, therefore we ask that you hold the city in contempt of court. And that could be it could be a nightmare. And so we really just want to maintain the process, which gives rights to both sides of the parties, and make sure that we all know what path that we should be on.
Could I ask a question? How many public records requests do we get citywide? And the reason I ask that is we don't just get a couple of records in our office. We get lots of requests for public records, and we have the same staff that everybody else has here. How many do we get?
It's well over 30,000. The Police Bureau alone gets over 22,000, and those are approximate because those numbers are increasing, and they have been increasing every year. And those numbers are also slightly undercounting. For example, people who go into the permit center, those numbers don't always include all the owner-occupant ones that we fill there in the permit center, that we're working to get those counted in GovQA as well. We do get the most public records requests of any entity in the state of Oregon. And when I last compared, we were getting more than the city of Seattle. So we're number one.
And we're only the 5th most passive-aggressive city in the nation. What happened?
Fifth?
Yeah.
Oh, we're losing ground.
We're sliding.
But on the other hand, I mean, I'm so proud that we are providing records to 30,000 people. I mean, that is just such a wonderful thing that our city can do. And I'm so proud of our online system that makes those records available. We used to have trouble emailing large files and they get bounced back, and it was just hard for requesters to get some of this stuff. It is all available now. We can upload those files. They can access them for up to 2 years. You know, it's not like I misplaced them or lost them. They have them. I feel like the level of customer service we're able to provide people on public records has really stepped up. I think it's a wonderful thing. I think we're going to continue working on that. We're still not where I know this council wants us to be, and I'm happy to say that, you know, the bureaus are continuing to work with me on that, and we're going to get there for the people of the city of Portland and the other members of the public who are making requests. And one step is to make sure that we understand what the court wants from us, because needless to say, as lawyers, job number one is to comply with the law, and we cannot do that unless we're sure what they want.
Great, and I just want to, I think you're being pretty hard on yourself as well. We have adopted technologies like Smarsh, and I think that was a game changer, right? In terms of text messages, it pretty much saves everything. It's easy, push button, out you go. So as technologies continue to be developed, and as, you know, in my personal view, as open source becomes more and more of a viable option for public records disclosure, I think that will make a difference. The part I'm just not sure how we ever get around without good old-fashioned hard line-by-line labor is this question of privacy. And I'm thinking back to a very specific incident in the first 3 years that I was here, where we erred on the side of public disclosure for a large file of documents from the police bureau. And frankly, we blew it because by disclosing those documents, buried 15,000 pages into the documents was some personal information. And that was really unfortunate. And so we're going to have to continue to figure out, how do we use technologies? How do we use our staff effectively? How do we err on the side of public disclosure, but in the process not make a big mistake by disclosing something that the public would be equally upset about having become public information? And I feel like you guys are frankly doing a good job of trying to find that right balance.
Thanks.
It's not an easy job. I don't get to talk to you that often, so I wanted to acknowledge
That's
that.
because
I appreciate what
I'm
you're doing.
reviewing emails for private information.
Great. Commissioner Udaly?
Commissioner Reed, did you want to
No,
jump
I
in?
did have one more
Okay,
question,
yeah.
thanks. And my question was, 30,000 requests a year. Could you give me an estimate of how many are individual requests and how many are commercial requests? Because I think it is different. I know the policy might not look different, but it should be. Because I think if somebody is doing a public records request because they stand to make a financial gain from that request, as compared to someone, say, whose car, they need a report of a car break-in, a house break-in, or something like that, right? So do you have a number?
I'm going to give you a very approximate number.
Okay. I won't hold you to it.
Because I'm not
It's
under oath.
I know as an
Okay.
attorney, I know that's hard, but.
I think our commercial request to the police bureau are around 18,000. I thought they got between 1,500 and 2,000 a month. So it varies, it goes up and down. There are commercial requesters who make requests to the police bureau on behalf of entities and/or who resell that information to entities.
Right.
And so I know the police bureau is looking at, methods to make it easier for the public to get their information. People need their reports for their stolen vehicle or their identity theft, while also dealing with this volume of commercial requesters, which we are required by law to fill in the same manner.
So can we change the law? Whose law?
It's the state legislature who set that up. Other states have different laws about commercial requesters and about like state residents versus out-of-state residents. The state of Oregon does not. And, I don't want to spend too much time on those policies, but it is a burden on the people of the city of Portland. Because even though we charge fees for all of these requests, none of those fees fully compensate the city for the cost of the staff that are filling those records. So to some level, we are subsidizing every single request. And so it may be only a few dollars of staff time on some of those commercial requests, but we are subsidizing them to a small degree, because we do not charge our full staff rates. We charge staff time plus 39%, which is benefits, which is not actual overhead, so it doesn't represent the full cost of staff time. And part of that was done to charge a lower staff rate for public records requests, which is good for the public. That was another choice council made, and it's a good choice for the public to charge the lower staff rate. But, since we do that across the board, commercial requesters also get that benefit, so those are also subsidized by the people of the city of Portland.
Interesting. Mayor?
Very good, Commissioner Udaly.
I have what I consider a friendly amendment to offer. First, I want to disclose, of course, I work for the city. I work with the city attorneys, and my office and bureaus receive public information requests. I also am personally acquainted with Alan Kessler, although I have had zero conversations with him about this case or about public records requests in general. I absolutely believe that the city must have a transparent, timely, accessible process for public records requests, but I am very interested in this issue of the distinction between members of the public and commercial entities. We can't get to that today. This is fascinating to me. I don't know if that makes me even more of a nerd, I guess, but, you know, I'm interested in expanding the forgiveness to an hour. I really do want to make these requests accessible. However, we know that we get frivolous requests. We know that we get broad-reaching requests, and that obviously with $30,000 a year, it can be incredibly costly. And so we have to balance the public interests of access to those requests and the public interests of us not hemorrhaging money to fulfill frivolous requests or requests for people seeking to make a profit off of the information. So I want to be clear that this resolution is not seeking to overturn the judgment in favor of Mr. Kessler that resulted in a refund. It is narrowly focused on the question of the injunction and what the judge meant by reasonable costs. Is that the right terminology?
Reasonable fees.
Reasonable fees, so that we can remain in compliance and not be repeatedly accused of being in contempt of court, because that would be another very costly reality for the city. So this is the language that we've come up with after conversations with the city attorney's office. It would be inserted after the first, therefore be it resolved, and it would read, be it further resolved, the city is already taking steps to have a records fee policy that ensures transparency, and thus the city should enter into settlement discussions during the pendency of the appeal to resolve the case.
Okay, I'll ask the question. What is a pendency?
Just pending, you could say pending while the appeal is pending. So that way we
That's a
could
new one.
continue, we need to go ahead and file the appeal because we have certain timelines, and if we don't go ahead and file the appeal, then we waive our ability to do so. But we could go ahead and enter into negotiations while we are handling that appeal.
Okay, so Commissioner Udaley has made a motion. Commissioner Hardesty has seconded it. Any further discussion on the amendment? Why don't we go ahead and take the roll on the amendment? I think it's not controversial. I think it's an important one. Carla, please call the roll.
Fritz?
Aye.
Hardesty? Aye. Udaley?
Thank you. Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye, the amendment's on the table. Thank you for that clarification. All right, public testimony.
We have 3 people signed up.
Great.
We have Lightning Super Karma, Emily Green, and Charles Bridge Crane Johnson.
Good morning. Would you like to start, please?
Doesn't matter which one.
Lightning likes to go in order that it was called.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Karma. My understanding, Mr. Kessler asked for the format to be in metadata form, and you came back and said you can provide it in native form. Now, my question is, do algorithms, are they exempt from the public record law? And it's my understanding they are. And where this gets into a confusion is that your software platform, GovQA, said they could provide that to him, but it would take time. It might take a lot of hours. In fact, they even came back with a certain amount of hours, almost like 6,500 hours to do this. But he did make that request. Now, then what he did, he took it a little bit farther. He went into court, and they came back. And now it appears to me the biggest problem right here is they already said that we're going to charge the lower fee, so you'll be okay on that, even though you might have to pay someone higher, so you kind of subsidize it. But my biggest problem I think they have is paying that $120,000 in attorney fees to Mr. Kessler. Now, no disrespect to Mr. Kessler, who's probably listening, I assume you're an attorney. Maybe you're not. But $120,000 is a good amount to pay. The city has an issue with that. I think that what they should do is try to negotiate with him, come to a lower price, and understand they did make statements to him that they could provide that to him. It might take longer. And again, GovQA said that they could, but it's going to take longer and it's going to take a lot of money to do that. So this is an interesting situation here because basically he has every right to get that data, but he's requesting it in a different format, not the one that is available and not the one that basically you maintain. He didn't want that. He wanted something different and something created, which the company said they could do. And so I find it interesting that you're kind of going back and forth on this issue that you want to save a little bit of money and understand what these attorneys already know because they are good attorneys. You just don't want to pay him the $120,000 attorney fee. Forget the appeal, pay him the $120,000, and let this be a lesson learned. Don't make statements and then don't deliver, because they will take you to court. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Emily Green on behalf of the Oregon Territory Chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists. As a member of the Freedom of Information Committee under that chapter and in my capacity as a senior staff reporter at Street Roots, I am urging you today to commit to transparency and the accessibility of public records rather than appealing this case, which instead would be using public resources to fight transparency. We believe the ruling is clear. Don't violate the law. Do not charge excessive fees. To appeal would be sending the wrong message. It would be one that would, on its surface, appear to double down on government secrecy. As a reporter in the city, I am often baffled with the difficulty and high cost of obtaining public records, especially as it compares to other large cities. This includes obtaining records through GovQA. I found it much easier using Seattle's version of GovQA to obtain records, whereas Portland's is often boggled down with excessive questions, and using it in lieu of an actual person to obtain records, figure out what records you need, is burdensome. And I want to be clear, every time a newsroom kills a story because the fees to obtain records to tell that story are too high, as Street Roots has had to do a number of times, every time that happens, it is an affront to the Fourth Estate. It is a gut punch to democracy itself. The Oregon Territory Chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists encourages the council to reject this appeal and pursue best practices reforms. In September 2018, at the request of Mayor Wheeler's chief of staff at the time, SPJ facilitated a discussion and input from 15 reporters who cover City Hall. The findings of that input request echoed the findings of the judge's ruling in that the city is often charging excessive fees, and this may in fact violate public records law. SPJ urges the city to review records fee practices to ensure transparency and to adopt an ordinance or policy to ensure compliance with the law. In closing, I just want to say, there always seems to be this idea that complying with public records requests is an additional service of the city, when in fact it is at the core of your duty as public servants. This is not a benign policy error. In addition to distorting the culture within bureaus as to their relationship and responsibilities to the public, high fees stifle public engagement and government accountability. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now it's time to say good afternoon, commissioners. When trying to keep track, Charles Bridgecrane Johnson for the record, and when trying to keep track of the awesome women journalists working in the Portland area, it's sometimes hard to keep track of who's the Mercury, who is or was at the Oregonian, et cetera. It seemed to me that the Emily Green byline was also on a story about how many houseless people we pack into our jails that the city auditor upheld the second year. We didn't get any better at that. But getting back to the issue at hand, well, first we'll address Mr. Lightning's question. There's two plaintiffs' counsels going after the city. One is Mr. Kessler, who is an attorney, and he has a co-counsel. But the part that really strikes me is right there at the very beginning of your first whereas. At the beginning of the whereas, it says that these records were requested regarding just an singular historic landmark commissioner. So what did our wonderful, compassionate city decide and discover? That there were about 3,500 pages from one commissioner, one historic landmarks commissioner. The third whereas, where that information is, or is it the fourth one? Fourth one, I guess, where you disclose about 3,500 pages of documents to the plaintiff in native format. That's an oxymoron. Pages are pieces of paper. You disclosed an amount of data, a number of bytes or something. That's what the native format is because it's an email. So I'm very glad that Ms. Green came up here to, I can't characterize it as whether she berated you, but she enthusiastically encouraged you to pursue best practices. And your very own craptastic document goes down to the very end of page 2 and hides the amount. It was disclosed in the testimony, but the $120,000 of possible attorney's fees. So you're not doing a very good job just with this item. I very much appreciate the wide-ranging discussion we had, but when we start with a whereas that talks about the Historic Landmarks Commission, one single commissioner on there, and we get into a craptastic conversation that says, what about victims of domestic violence? Courts can narrow the scope. Lawyers can narrow the scope. So for you to use a situation where we have a historic landmark commissioner and then interject the idea that, well, maybe the historic landmark commissioner and whichever bureau this was, development services, we're talking about secret, confidential, private, personal information is not best practices for y'all. So the last time we had an appeal we got excited about, I think, went back to the death of the COAB. And fortunately, the PSEP that replaced it turned out good. So maybe, I'm not saying yay or nay on whether you pursue this appeal, but let's get the nuts and bolts right and have a generalized annual report about how we're improving on public records requests and those hours or half-hour increments. Thanks very much.
Thank you both. That completes public testimony. This is a resolution. Call the roll.
Fritz.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Udaly.
I just want to appreciate Rachel Alexander for coming to testify today. I fully support the best practices reforms detailed in the testimony that Society of Professional Journalists submitted. However, I respectfully disagree that this resolution would in any way hinder those efforts. It is narrowly focused on the injunction by the judge that would put us in contempt of court if we were determined to have overcharged someone a few dollars for a public record request, and that it would be irresponsible for this council to leave that liability open. I vote aye.
Wheeler.
The only way to get clarification on the meaning of the word excessive is to appeal. I'd love to be able to just take the judge out, have a beer, have this clarified, but that is not the process that we have here in America. We have a legal system. The judge will not be offended by our bringing this back to ask the question. I think it would be utterly irresponsible of us not to get that clarification. And to equate us asking the clarification with being anti-public disclosure or anti-free press, I think frankly is a ridiculous comparison, and I reject it. I vote aye. The resolution is adopted. Good luck. Next item, 103.
103, grant a one-year temporary revocable permit to Verizon Wireless LLC for wireless communications services in the city.
Colleagues, first we have an amendment request to make to this ordinance. The amendment is due to the entity's recent name change from Verizon Wireless LLC to Celco Partnership, DBA Verizon Wireless. The amendment has been filed with the council clerk prior to this morning's council session and copies distributed. I move the amendment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Carla, please call the roll.
I'm sorry, who seconded?
I'll give it to Commissioner Udaly this time.
Thank you. Fritz?
Aye.
Hardesty? Aye. Udaly?
Aye.
Wheeler?
I would be so bad at branding. I vote aye. The amendment is adopted. This is the first reading on a temporary revocable permit for Selco Partnership, DBA Verizon Wireless. In October 2018, the Federal Communications Commission issued an order limiting local government's ability to impose requirements on small cell deployments, including fee limitations. Portland is leading a national coalition of local governments in litigation against the FCC overreach in the small cell order. The order was effective in early 2019. Portland, like other cities, had to update its standard wireless franchise agreement to comply with federal law. Verizon has agreed to the city's franchise requirements and has asked the city to consider granting a temporary revocable permit under substantially similar terms as the new franchise. The temporary revocable permit will allow Verizon to continue providing wireless service and begin deployment of small wireless facilities. And Jennifer Lee is here on behalf of the Office for Community Technology. Good afternoon, Jennifer. Thanks for being here.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. For the record, I'm Jennifer Lee, Program Manager with the Office for Community Technology. As the Mayor mentioned in his introductory remarks, the city updated its standard wireless franchise agreement to comply with recent changes in federal law. The terms of the Selco Partnership DBA Verizon Wireless franchise is commensurate, as required by federal law, to the AT&T wireless franchise passed by City Council last year. The ordinance before you today continues Verizon's existing right to operate in the city and incorporates those recent changes in federal law. And it is for a limited term, 1 year, or until the franchise agreement is passed by City Council. The city charter requires a process for franchise agreements that can take up to 4 to 6 months to complete. Because of that, Verizon has asked the city to consider granting it the temporary 1-year permit under substantially similar terms. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioner Hardesty has a question.
I am thrilled that we now have someone who has actually done these 1-year agreements in Beaverton and Lake Oswego and other locations, a lawyer that tells us we really don't have to actually have franchise agreements. We could do these 1-year approval processes. I am thrilled that we're able to do that, because if the FCC ever gets a clue and we can then address the issues of environmental impact and all the other health issues associated with these franchisees, we won't have to wait a decade in order to make changes. And it is my hope that with this model now in place, that any other franchise agreements that come in front of us, that we would switch them over to this year-to-year agreement. I think it is revolutionary, and the fact that we didn't have 4 people is why it came to the place that we now have a 1-year agreement rather than a 10-year franchise. So I want to thank your staff for the incredible work that they did, and I'm not remembering the lawyer's name that actually had worked in Beaverton and said, well, I've done these all over the place. I don't understand why you guys don't do it. But she knows who she is, and I just want to appreciate that we have that expertise in-house and how wonderful we got to use it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fritz has a question.
Sure.
Am I correct in remembering that we had previously been discussing a 10-year agreement with Verizon, also Selco?
Yep, they all want 10 years, yeah.
Right. So there is a 10-year franchise that's going to be considered by City Council, but this will be a 1-year temporary revocable permit to close the gap, as it will, because of the city charter requirements.
Okay, thank you. I guess I have the opposite thought from Commissioner Hardesty. I would have liked to have locked in the franchise agreement now, because it's more favorable financially than the FCC's minimum. And if Verizon was willing to do the 10 years, I would have done that. We have been fighting about the health impacts for, 11 years now. And even under the Barack Obama administration, we were not able to get the FCC to allow us to consider health impacts. So I think that the likelihood of that happening in the next year is slim to none. So I will, of course, agree to this limited extension, but I am very concerned that it leaves us open to having to go to the lesser financial standards, which would have a huge impact on the general fund.
Commissioner Fritz, if I could respond to that, the temporary revocable permit and the 10-year franchise do have substantially similar terms. So, if for whatever reason, second reading, we don't have second reading on the 10-year franchise, we'll still have those same terms that we negotiated with Verizon and AT&T.
Right, well, we're only locking it in for a year rather than for 10.
Yeah, I think after a year, we can reevaluate the situation and see where we need to go if the franchise hasn't been before council.
Okay, thank you.
So this is not a either or, it's a potentially and situation. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Very good. Public testimony, Carla.
Yes, we have one person signed up, Charles Bridge Crane Johnson.
Come on up.
Good afternoon, Charles Bridge Crane Johnson. I want to thank City Councilor Commissioner Fritz for acknowledging that there's been sometimes we call it robust discussion about different opinions on the health impacts or non-health impacts for 5G. I know that we already have had a little bit wider ranging discussion than I was expecting on this item because we're just really trying to make sure that one of the other big carriers gets essentially the same deal as what we've already done with AT&T. I hope that a year from now, as we're living under a different presidential regime, and who knows who'll be on the FCC, we can include in that conversation whether there really is, as I think maybe Commissioner Hardesty was alluding to, the idea of franchises and services in the right of way. It's totally reasonable and good public policy to get financial public benefits and services, sort of like we do with Xfinity Comcast through the Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission. So I don't see any reason for you to not vote in favor of this, and be glad that it's for a year so things come back by and we can engage in a hopefully new discussion with new FCC members and a new president. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your being here. That concludes testimony. Any further business on this item? This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Next item, 104, please.
Authorize an interfund loan not to exceed $3,333,500 from the Transportation Operating Fund to the General Fund to provide financing for prepayment of limited tax housing revenue bonds, 2005 Series D, and amend the fiscal year 2019-20 budget.
Colleagues, this ordinance would temporarily transfer, I want to make sure I've got the right thing. Yes, thank you. This ordinance would temporarily transfer available contingency funds in the Bureau of Transportation's Transportation Operating Fund to the Government Bond Redemption Fund to allow for the prepayment of the city's limited tax housing revenue bonds, 2005 Series D. This is an emergency ordinance so that the prepayment of the bonds can occur as early as possible to take advantage of interest rate savings opportunities and maximize savings for the taxpayers. Because this prepayment is outside the scheduled and budgeted debt service on the bonds, this ordinance also amends the fiscal year 1920 budget to allow for the full redemption of the outstanding bonds. Accordingly, this item constitutes a special public meeting for the budget amendment and is open to public testimony on the budget revision. Debt Manager Matt Gurek, it's Gurek, right?
Yeah.
Matt, thanks. I wanted to make sure I got that right. Is here to present this item. After the presentation, we'll hear any public testimony for the budget amendment and the interfund loan under this ordinance. Good morning, good afternoon, actually, at this point.
Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. The purpose of this legislation is to provide an internal refinancing of the city's limited tax housing revenue bonds, Series 2005D, which are serviced by the city's general fund. The Series 2005D bonds bear interest at rates above current market levels. However, because of the size of the bonds and relatively short final maturity, a public market refinancing is not economical.
As an alternative approach, the Debt Management Division and the Treasury Division have coordinated and identified an interfund loan as a viable means to internally refinance the Series 2005 D bonds. PBOT has approved the use of its Transportation Operating Fund as a temporary funding source for the general fund, refinancing the bonds, with an understanding that the funds will be fully repaid no later than June 30th of 2025, which coincides with the final maturity of the Series 2005 D bonds. Interfund loan interest will accrue at the city's investment fund rate and compound monthly, resulting in neutral economics and no opportunity costs of lost earnings to PBOT. The $3.3 million interfund loan is expected to produce approximately $200,000 in total debt service savings in the city's general fund through fiscal year 2025. In order to capture savings as soon as possible, the legislation before you amends the fiscal year 2019-20 budget to allow for the execution of the interfund loan and to increase the budgeted expenditures and the governmental bond redemption fund to prepay the Series 2005 D bonds in full. And let me know if you have any questions.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. So we're doing this so we can save money, right?
That is correct.
Thank you very much.
Any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Very good. Please call the roll.
Fritz?
Aye.
Hardesty? Aye. Udaly?
Thank you. Aye.
Wheeler?
You just saved the taxpayers a lot of money. Thank you. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next item, 105.
Approve findings to authorize an exemption to the competitive bidding requirements and authorize the use of an alternative contracting method of construction manager, general contractor, in connection with the Park Lane Park construction project for an estimated amount of $8,500,000.
Colleagues, Park Lane Park is one of the easternmost parks in Portland, and at 25 acres is the largest open space in the Centennial neighborhood. The park serves nearly 2,500 families in a diverse community that's historically been underserved by parks, and this has been a long time in the making. Multnomah County donated the original 5 acres back in 1994, and the city then purchased an adjacent 19.5 acre parcel back in 2001. Commissioner Fish completed the master plan in 2009, and Commissioner Fritz allocated additional systems development charges for development in 2016 and 2018 during her tenure as Parks Commissioner. And we've heard her talk eloquently about the importance of this particular park in East Portland. And at long last, we're getting ready to break ground on this important public asset. Today, we'll consider an alternative to what is considered our usual contracting process. Under the construction manager general contractor method, we will be able to allow for better collaboration with the construction team and facilitate the design and construction of the diverse array of amenities that this park is slated to offer. Before I turn this over to the procurement folks, a word on funding. New parks can be built with fees developers pay on new construction called system development charges. But system development charges, often called SDCs, cannot be used for ongoing operations and maintenance needs. The parks team is estimated that the completed park will cost about $470,000 per year in operations and maintenance beginning in the year 2022. Commissioner Fritz and Commissioner Fish both committed to being transparent about the ongoing needs of new park assets, and I'll maintain that same clarity during my tenure as Parks Commissioner. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lester Spittler from Procurement, and Britta Herwig also here from the Parks Bureau. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. My name is Lester Spittler. I'm the Chief Procurement Officer. The legislation before you today is an authorizing ordinance to exempt the Park Lane project from the competitive low bid procurement method and allow the city to issue a request for proposals for a construction manager / general contractor or CMGC. City Council, acting as a local contract review board, has the authority to exempt projects for the city from the low bid approach. The city issued a RFP this past summer to hire a design team for the project, and the contract to Macy Walker was authorized by council in September 2019. State statute and city code require the city to address findings when we are proposing to exempt a project from the low bid approach. We are required to post those draft findings online for 14 days prior to council approval for public comment. For this exemption, we did not receive any public comment. The following are some of the more prominent reasons to conduct a RFP versus a low bid for this project. Through RFP, the city is able to select a contractor through a best value approach with the experience and qualifications necessary to coordinate and develop a 25-acre park and with demonstrated expertise participating in a collaborative CMGC design process. The second reason, the contractor selected will have the opportunity to provide input during the design process, including on the construction packaging and sequencing to ensure equity in service delivery and to avoid high future maintenance costs. This also reduces the amount of change orders throughout the life of the construction project because the contractor had an opportunity to participate in design. Additionally, the CMGC process allows input into the development and construction of a park which reflects community pride and is safe, clean, and accessible for all ages, cultures, and abilities. Because of the collaborative nature of the CMGC process, there is continuous value engineering to ensure cost containment and best value accrued for the community. And lastly, the CMGC process provides greater opportunities for co-bid certified subcontractors to work on the project because of the pre-construction process where the contractor is working with the design team to finalize the design and at the same time identifying packages of work to solicit subcontractors for. If there are any questions, we're happy to answer them. Britta has a little bit of information about the park itself. If there are no questions, we recommend that you approve the findings attached to the ordinance and authorize the issuance of an RFP for a CMGC delivery approach for the Park Lane project.
Thank you. Commissioner Hardesty has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. Not doing a low bid process allows more flexibility with the prime contractor. What's the guarantee that the prime contractor is going to meet the goals of ensuring that they are subcontracting with minority and women-owned firms? And what is the goal for this $8 million project?
Sure. The process itself for a CMGC approach is really a two-phased approach. The first is a pre-construction where the contractor is helping to inform the design. During that period, they're identifying scopes of work that they cannot self-perform and that they'll subcontract. Throughout that period, they're able to work closely with park staff, with procurement staff to make sure that for any trade that they're not able to self-perform, they are doing active outreach to co-bid certified firms, engaging those firms. And through a CMGC process, they also have the ability to do a best value selection for subcontractors as well. That is different from a low bid approach where they're also seeking the lowest bid. So the city has the ability to encourage and even force them to do a best value approach for those subcontractors, which would give more of an opportunity for the co-bid firms to perform on the project. The second phase is when the design is 100%, we have a guaranteed maximum price and the construction starts. That's when the contractor is going to have to live up to the promises they made during the first phase of who they were going to outreach and engage to as far as certified subcontractors. The goals that would apply to the project are the city's standard goals of 22% utilization for certified subcontractors.
So is there a difference between how this process works and how the normal city process, which is aspirational, works?
This is aspirational as well, but we have a greater opportunity to achieve that aspirational goal because of the collaborative nature. Whereas with a low bid, it's sort of, there's inherent conflicts with us asking for an aspirational goal, but those contractors are forced to accept the lowest bid, which doesn't give them the opportunity to sort of understand the value proposition and align their goals with our goals for the project.
So if we approve this, and I'm going to be clear, I'll speak for myself. If I approve this, I'm going to actually expect us to reach the goals, not to aspire to the goals, but to actually reach or exceed the goals, because this is, we're doing a process that's supposed to work better than just going after the low bid. And I certainly want my community to benefit from this change in how we're going to do procurement. I don't see actually real results from this rather than aspirations, I'm never going to support this again. So I just want to put that on the record. The last thing I want to say about this, it's going to cost $400,000 a year. Did I hear that correctly, for maintenance of and upkeep of this park after it's built?
Yes, so this is a very early estimate. We don't have a design currently. We're just starting the design process. And based on the master plan that was completed 10 years ago. There are a number of program elements that we are expecting to include in this design. There'll be a skate park, ball fields, shelters, playgrounds, playgrounds, and those all have associated operations and maintenance costs. And because it's a 25-acre, fairly large park, we anticipate that the costs will be high, or will be in the $400,000 range for O&M. But again, like we don't have the design, so we don't know exactly what we're designing, and we'll clarify as we know more what the actual costs will be. It'll be easier at a later point.
Well, I think the city council needs to know if we are committing ourselves to a financial scheme that we cannot support as early as we possibly can. That's daunting to say. It's, that it could be around $400,000, but we don't know. It could be more. Yes, great area. It's right. It depends on what side of the street, whether it's Portland or Gresham. And so it makes me wonder whether or not this is a good two-government partnership, because, in that whole area, it just depends on what side of the street, and there's no rhyme or reason. It's based on sewer. Let me just say that I'm going to mark down, I'm concerned if you're telling us today the operating cost will be $400,000 a year. That's a huge concern. We already know that parks every year we're cutting stuff, and don't think this year will be any different. So that's where I am.
Very good. Commissioner Fritz has a comment.
Two comments now, thank you. First, Commissioner Hardesty, I encourage you to get a briefing from the park staff so that they can give you the information about the utilization of minority and women firms and workers in the other projects that we've done with this alternative contracting method. I was very happy with the results. Second, with regards to operations and maintenance, we do have a binding city policy that new facilities of any kind do get new operations and maintenance, and that gets built into the budget. And so I really, the choice is, I appreciate the mayor being very transparent, as Commissioner Fisher and I were also, so that we knew up front what an estimate is. As staff mentioned, we can't be completely accurate until the design is finished. And really the choice is, do we build this park or not? And I was very happy to dedicate another $20 million in system development charges for a park that the community in Centennial has been prioritizing. In fact, the entire East Portland Coalition prioritized this park as their number one choice, even before Gateway Discovery and Lewitville. We didn't have View. We didn't have the money to do Park Lane at the beginning of my tenure as Parks Commissioner, but by the end of it, we did have sufficient construction impact fees to be able to allocate this money. But so really now is the time for us to decide, are we going to build this park, finish building this park in the Centennial neighborhood, or are we not going to do it at all?
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Do we have public testimony on this item, Carla?
No one signed up.
Very good. All right. This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Thank you. And last but not least, the Red Lantern Award today goes to item number 109.
Extend contract with Central Parking System of Washington, Inc. through March 31, 2021 for parking garage management services.
Commissioner Daly.
Thank you, Mayor. This contract provides parking garage management services for the city's smart park garages. The purpose of this amendment is to extend the contract through March 31st, 2021, not to exceed a total contract term of 10 years. This is the last extension that can be approved for this contract. An RFP will be initiated in early 2020 to select a vendor for a new contract. Here to answer any questions you may have is Smart Park General Manager Michael Jacobs. Welcome, Michael.
Good morning. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Michael Jacobs. I manage the Smart Park program for the Bureau of Transportation. Again, the ordinance before you is to extend the city's contract with Central Parking Systems of Washington through March 31st, 2021. The Central Parking provides parking garage management services for the Smart Park program, specifically the administration and management of the daily operations in the garages, the janitorial program, the permits, the merchant validation program, the equipment maintenance. They maintain our network, and they are responsible for the PCI compliance in the program. In the Smart Park program, we do value high-quality customer service. To monitor how the operator is performing, we have them conduct customer satisfaction surveys. Last year, we saw a 94% satisfaction rate overall for customer service in the garages. We saw an 88% satisfaction rate with the automated payment system, and we saw a 91% overall satisfaction rate from our merchants in downtown on the merchant validation program. The contract is funded by the receipts from the garages. Currently, the annual revenues are about $13.3 million. That's about 20% higher than they were when Central Parking took over the contract in 2011. Our operational expenses for the current year are budgeted at approximately $3 million. Again, we're requesting a one-year extension for this contract. As Commissioner Udaley mentioned, this is the last contract extension request that we'll be making for this contract, as it will fulfill the full 10 years. Because of that, we're going to be providing, or beginning in a couple of weeks, we're going to start putting together a new vendor selection process, drafting and releasing a request for proposals, hopefully in June or July, and then reviewing those proposals by the end of summer. And our intent would be to finalize a new contract by the holidays so that we can begin a transition plan for a new contract to start April 1st of 2021. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Colleagues, any questions on this item?
Just one. How will the RFP change? Unfortunately, I was intimately involved in this smart parking contracts a few years back when Vera Katz was mayor. And the RFP would read 20 years, multi-level downtown parking experience. Now, we finally got the mayor to revise that RFP. But I'm always concerned if RFPs are written in a way that actually only one company would benefit. I have not been following, I must say, the smart parks of late. It was a very interesting experience that I had, but it was an ability to make sure that there was going to be competition. So it would be great if you, when you're developing the RFP, when it's in draft, if you could send it to our offices, just so that we have a sense that it really is an open process and no one entity will be at more of an advantage than another. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Very good. Do we have public testimony on this item, Carla?
No one signed up.
All right, very good. This is a first reading of the non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Thank you very much. And we are adjourned until tomorrow, Thursday, at 2 p.m.